Oh, man, okay.
It's been a long day, but.
Yes, it
I have
has.
a monster about to
I knew it.
do this.
Go.
I'm gonna be off the roads here. You're
Yes.
gonna have to keep up with me.
Right.
Just do a little gym. Maybe we'll do a whole get up, stand up. Make you do all kinds of activities.
I'm game.
Make use of the icebreakers.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mr. Beats, the Achilles is fully recovered.
That's right, I'm ready for the Macarena right now.
Oh,
Charlie. Well,
Save that for tomorrow night.
yeah. All right.
Melissa's in.
Melissa's there.
Yeah.
All right, I have a picture of the flags. Just direct me when you're ready. Unable to join as panelists. You were invited as panelists. Please sign into your account.
You are not able to join. So. You
Where's the
can,
email? I'm still looking for that.
it came in about 10 o'clock
it's
this
there.
morning, like 10:20.
From Andy.
Board meeting location.
So when I,
I got one on the first,
There's,
About 15 minutes behind.
we don't want to know how.
So now
I
the
don't want to know how to incriminate yourself.
You may want to turn the volume down.
Yeah, it's in the top. That's the thing.
Yeah, if everybody turns their
I
volume
wait till the
down,
days
we'll
of them.
do that.
What's that?
That's the thing. How it's. Top down. I would make it top.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sometimes you get.
Yeah. If anybody turns down their volume.
Yo. That's fine.
If everybody will turn up the volume, then we'll have any feedback.
We buy.
Your volume.
No traffic coming in.
That's like, he's probably in 87, 85. Yeah, you get used to it. Yeah, I thought, nah, they're cool.
Yeah.
Already.
Is that better?
Yeah.
I don't think it's better.
Yeah, perfect.
So what's been going on?
Same old, same old.
old, same.
And
Say it.
if anybody wants to-
Yeah.
Tired.
Yeah, there you go, little vacay up here.
We would just turn. the volume
Yeah.
down.
It's up.
That's all.
Uh-huh.
Dang.
Is that volume?
Yeah.
Everybody on?
You
Yeah.
definitely
I think
deserve
we have everybody.
time out.
So I think
We're
we're ready.
watching someone else even tell us.
I would have gone a couple more.
See,
I have someone outside
Yeah, okay.
telling me if they.
time to enjoy it.
There you go.
Yep.
So I
And you
think we're,
you can always come back too.
we're good.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Whenever we
Absolutely.
start. If,
So Mr. Ramirez is the only one
Oh,
who connected.
Shane. That's because I can read at the bottom of this thing.
Okay.
I
A prescription or what?
No. It's just, got them on wall, they're pretty cool. Cause I can.
Got 'em at wall.
he's getting ready for his,
Gambling.
gambling again. For the,
Did you tell John?
I haven't seen.
Okay.
He's getting ready for the Vegas, Texas Hold'em.
Texas Hold'em.
Shit. Oh, man. Go ahead and head over to Miss Newman.
Anyway, you're doing, we'll just get going. There we go. All right. Yeah.
I'm ready.
All right, let's call this special board meeting to order. It's Tuesday, September 6, 2022, and the time is 6:05 p.m. We're having this special board meeting at the Governing Board held in the JW Marriott Camelback Inn, 5402 East Lincoln Drive, Paradise Valley, Arizona. With that said, would you please rise for the pledge of allegiance? Mr. Ramirez, would you lead us? That's right on our screen.
Sure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, roll call. Mr. Brad Beach.
Present.
Ms. Susan Bowie.
Here.
Ms. Lourdes Vasquez.
Present.
Mr. Renee Ramirez.
Here.
Myself, Joel Kramer, all 5 members are present. And we do have a quorum. Adoption of the agenda, Mr. Ludo.
No recommended changes, but I would like to note that tonight is Ms. Vasquez's first meeting replacing Mr. John Hayes.
All right.
So nice to have you on board.
Yep.
With that said, then do I hear the motion to adopt the agenda as is?
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please acknowledge by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. We want to call to the public. Do we have anybody on the public side? No call to the public. Then we're moving right into item number 2, which is ASBA Seneca Valley Universal School District number 35 board rating with Ms. Nikki Blair and ASBA. Right?
All right, well, thank you for inviting me, and please let me know if I need to speak up. First of all, I would like to, again, thank you for inviting me. I don't think I have been out to work individually with your board. If I have, it's been a while. But I do have the pleasure of serving as ASBA Board Support and Equity Services Manager. So in my role, I do training and developments. I create content. I also help identify keynotes and breakout session materials for our events, as well as coach on equitable practices throughout the state. This morning I was in Saddle Mountain. Last week I was in Chino Valley, so I kind of make my way around the state, and so I didn't have to go very far for you all since we're here at the Camelback Inn. A little bit about me, I always like to share just because, like, who are you? Why should we listen to you? And in addition to working with ASBA and having 5 years working with them and a deep knowledge of board governance and policies, I am also a school board member in the Washington Elementary School District, and I've been on my board for 5 years. I have 2 students that are school age. One is still in Washington, and she's a 7th grader. She's missing her first volleyball game, which is tonight. And then my son is in Glendale Union, he's a junior. And I come to this work through children's behavioral health is where I started my work, and then went into policy training and compliance. So used to work in group homes and doing behavior management plans with students that were severely at risk of housing placements. And so that's what I did for about 6 years before I got my master's in public administration, and then kind of transitioned into policy and training and development. I also spent some time at United Way implementing a dropout prevention program in the middle schoolers. It was called Destination Graduation, where we used data to identify students and then match them with tiered interventions. And then my son is also gifted and special needs. So, and I worked a lot with children with IEPs. So kind of all of that together, that working with students, really understanding where students come from, being an advocate for special needs students, having kids in the system, being a board member, and then doing training, development, and human resources, kind of found this job to be perfect for me. I just enjoy using all of those different skills to help boards better govern themselves. So I don't know you all very well, so if we could just briefly, your name, how long you've been on the board, and maybe something that you like to do for fun besides board meetings.
Lourdes, you're the first one.
I'm the newbie. This is my
Right.
first, hi, my name is Lourdes Vasquez. I was in the school system for 44 years. I just retired. I started from the bottom, worked my way up, became a teacher, did ISS for the district for 10 years, and then I came back, I became an administrator. And then I took over the distance learning kids and then the credit recovery for the high school and all that. So anyway, long story short, I retired in this year at the end of the school year in June. And I like to cook. I like to crochet. I like to do anything that I can do with my hands. And I love my grandkids. And any kid that you don't want, I want them. They're all mine. I'm the Lulu Nana of everybody that knows me. So
Thank you.
thank you. And I'm happy to be here.
I'll go to Susan.
Susan Fobian, I've been on the board 14 years, I think. And let me see, I worked for First Things. I started First Things First at the same time I started on the board. So I have a 14-year anniversary with First Things First. And spare time, I don't really have so much. I think when I have it, I enjoy things like reading. I love to read. It's a very positive feeling. And,
You can talk my husband.
I just think it's just the best. And you know, baking, things like that.
Thank you. Good name.
Hey there. Well, this is the end of my 4th year on the governing board, and I've taught for about 35 years and worn a lot of different hats. My big gig used to be to take German exchange students at Rio Rico High School. I took over 250 of them from our community. I'll wear this down in about 20 years time. And I
Where in
coached-
Germany?
So it's not all over the place. Frankfurt, Berlin, to the Baltic Sea, to Hamburg, the Union and Dresden. Munich, Salzburg.
My brother-in-law was stationed there, so we went.
Kind of like the Johnny Cash of Germany.
Okay, cool. So,
So I did that and then I coached chess. I'm real proud of the fact that I took Rio Rico High School to a state tournament 16 out of 20 years.
nice.
So we were tough as nails. And we knocked off North one time and we were ranked number 15 and they were ranked number 2. They were shell shocked. I wanted to know where this little town was. And then later on, just when everybody thought that we were done with that kind of thing, you know, the giant killers, then we played Barry Goldwater.
Mhm.
They had that big school with all kinds of money and all kinds of, they had a guy who was a grandmaster. And so they had to play little rinky dink Rio Rico on the way to their path. And they thought they were gonna be state champions that year. They were gonna play Catalina Foothills and that's all they talked about, round after round after round. And my buddy who coaches over there. Yeah, I know. I'm really bad. He thought, oh, careful because you gotta play them. So we knocked them off. Sure. That's my thing. I love coaching chess at the high school. I did that for 20 years. Then I coached basketball for 30 years. I mean, for 2.5 years as a varsity coach. Then I coached 7 years as a freshman. That was a lot of fun. I
And you
used to see
said,
Brad all the time because he coached wrestling.
so 4 years, are you up for reelection this year?
No, that's kind of a long story.
He would have
It's kind of a
been,
sad story.
Oh, okay.
And I was really looking forward to it. And
Okay.
then my father passed away.
Mhm.
So that really hard on me.
Yeah, I did want to take a moment
Yes, sir.
after we were done to kind of acknowledge Mr. Hayes as well.
So,
And maybe I'll just, since we're talking about that, and I'll just do that. I do recognize that you lost a member of your team very recently and somewhat suddenly. And I know Mr. Hayes, I've seen him in a lot of trainings. And so I know that we at ASBA hope he is resting well and his family is doing well.
Mhm.
We're certainly thinking about you. It's difficult to move through. So.
So I went in there, thanks to Mr. Gruber, I took a job later on after I retired in 2016. Teaching at Calabasas, and that was a lot of fun. It was a real eye opener, a real challenge. Because like I said, they had a big tower, we had just at the beginning of the year. You know, you walk in there and you're a veteran, you think you're gonna be, you think you're gonna walk in there like a veteran, but man, she can tell you, it's just,
So-
it's a different story teaching middle school. So I taught there for 2 years.
Okay.
And now I teach at else high school,
Okay,
and I've been there because I got on the governing board, so the conflict with it.
Yes.
And I taught over there. And I like them just, I can buy some of my buddy here. And just do, like Jeopardy.
thank
If
you
let
very
me-
much
if
for
you let
that.
me, I'll talk to you.
I know, but I'm gonna, my job as a facilitator is to make sure that we get through the content in 3 hours. So if I cut you off, it's not because it's not a fascinating story, it's just that
That's okay, Joe's
you paid
happy.
me to do something and I want to make sure I get it done.
Yeah.
So my job as a facilitator is to keep it moving, so that's what I'm gonna do, going over to Joel.
I am retired as well, 29 years in education, 27 years spent in Nogales as a teacher and then as a school administrator. I retired in 2016. Since then, I've been working, helping a gentleman get his business off the ground. Caregiver in place in Green Valley, and then from there, been working 4 years for Pima County as their emergency management coordinator. In other words, I train people how to get out of buildings.
Nice.
Fire drills and all that good stuff. I'm the liaison for the catastrophic insurance company, whatever that does.
So what do you do for fun when you're not showing people how to?
I used to golf, I used to do all those things, but I kind of gave all that up when you had kids and my kids were active and all that. I invested all my time in there. And now all my golf friends have. I was the youngest of all those guys and they're all passed on because they were a lot of those older gentlemen. Golf in Santa Cruz, we don't have one other than 2 back. So, yeah. That's it. I mean, other than that, that's about it. Like to go to the ocean, we do and things like that. So.
Brad.
Yes, ma'am. I'm Brad. I've been teaching 20 years science. I've been on the board for about a year or so. And married, have 3 kids, 4 grandchildren. And I'm like, Lourdes, you know, if my kids were called grandkids, I would have still kept them around the house. Yeah, it's different having grandkids. Love them.
What school are you at?
Rio Rico.
Oh,
No, well, right now I'm at Pearson High School, but I'm a board member for this Santa Cruz Valley 35. And Susan, you're always welcome to weed at my house. You know, I love to bike, run, anything outdoors, swim. Yeah, you name it.
and wrestle.
And Erasmus, yeah.
My cousin Brett Connor was a wrestler. He's older now, but he was a wrestler off through high school. He was a sweet person.
Yeah.
Brett Connor.
For what school?
Oh, shoot, I don't know what school. He's in the West Valley. He lives in like that Avondale area.
Okay.
Hello,
Hi.
I actually know who you are.
David, you're the superintendent here at Santa Cruz Valley. So I've been here, this is my 9th year as superintendent and 31st year in education, so. I like my short time not to make decisions. And that's one of the favorite things that I like to do is just walk my 2 Mastiff lap dogs and walk with them, and
Do they walk you or do you?
they walk me, and then but I like to talk to them because they just look at me like, okay, you're right,
Yeah.
No questions asked.
no questions asked. So,
And then we've got Shannon and Angie in the back.
Hi, Shannon, and so communications, 10 years in the district, something fun, riding bikes, camping, outdoors, that's been.
Very nice. Angie,
I am the board secretary and also regional secretary, and I'm also the Lucky Eventual Homeless Coordinator. And I've been with the district for, this is going on my 19th year.
okay. Nice. Well, this is an interesting board where everyone is a former educator.
Mhm.
So when I say interesting, I say that because it can be both interesting in a good way.
No,
Oh, well, first things first is still very education focused. But I also know that sometimes when we have a lot of board members that are all educators, that's a lot of individual personal experience. So sometimes getting all of those things together can be a challenge. I don't know how your board meetings are going. I haven't been watching them or anything like that, but I just think that every time I see a board that's primarily educators, it's usually a lot of great ideas, but sometimes it can be really hard to get everybody in the same direction. So I don't know if that's been a challenge of yours, but I did see some of the things in the self-evaluation, which is what we're going to go through today. So moving on today, our purpose is to really try to identify some goals for the board. Generally, when I do this training, we do have our own online board self-evaluation. It used to cost money to get the detailed report. It doesn't now. It's completely free with your membership. In your folder, there's a value of membership thing, and it tells you all the different things you get as a member, not only the district, but individual members can call us, contact us, all of that great stuff. But one of the things is the self-evaluation that's online. You can get the detailed question by question answers for free. And the nice thing about that, it's very similar to this one, only it will track year after year. So you'd be able to see how this year compared to the next year, compared to the next year. So in the future, if you wanted to use that one, you would just ask for the link and we could get that to you. And then we would send you the detailed report, and all of that will be free unless you wanted us to come and facilitate something around that. So generally this part 2 one, and part 1, what we would do is we would look through the survey or your board self-evaluation results. And then we would go through an exercise to try to come to consensus on a few things that we really wanted to zero in on. And then this part 2 would really be about how do we begin to craft SMART goals around those specific things that the board wants to work on. So what I want to first start off with is just talk about that. We're going to talk about the continuous improvement process and the process of goal setting a little bit, and then we are going to look at the evaluation. I didn't make enough copies for everyone, but I do have several that we can share, and I believe I can even pull it up on the screen if we wanted to look at it that way. But essentially that's what we're gonna need to do is go through this survey and figure out what the board wants to work on. The one thing that I do want to make it distinguish between district goals and board goals. They're different. So your district goals is your strategic plan. It is the goals that you have for the district in the various buckets, whether that be budget, transportation, education, social, emotional, what have you. Your board goals are very specific to the operation of the board and the things that the board needs to work on in order to improve their own operation. So that can be anything from team building, to establishing protocols, to taking on the project of identifying a board superintendent, superintendent evaluation to. So those are the things that are very specific to the board that the board has control over. And so when we go to start identifying goals and creating SMART goals, we're creating those for ourselves as board members and not going to be given to anybody else to do. So the ownership lays here, which means that as you go forward with those goals, the progress is up to yourselves to hold yourselves accountable. Any questions there? Okay. So we already kind of dove in a little bit later than we had anticipated. So I want to go ahead and pass out a couple of versions of this, if you gentlemen can share. And then, if those two maybe can share, that's only one copy. And that's all I have. I have the 3 copies.
Does everybody have one?
No, there's only
I'll
3.
figure that you went to that side.
Yeah, somehow they did go away, even though I.
That's okay.
Oh, just think they came back or.
Okay, yes. So, let me see if I can bring this up, because I think it would be good to show this. Oh, I can't see. And then my control panel is in here. I'm gonna stop sharing this. You can see this. I want to be able to show the response. If I can share the screen with it. Okay, there we go. Some more. So I'm going to start sharing this screen now. Okay.
Maybe if I forgot that we do have some members of the team that are virtual as well, and I apologize that we didn't want to introduce them,
Oh,
but
okay.
just so you're aware, we do
Okay.
have Assistant Superintendent Shadler, Assistant Superintendent, or Dr. Leonardville. Then we have Superintendent Intern Rebecca Cabetta, who's also on there as well.
Okay, great. And if there's specific questions from them, this is mostly for the board, so,
Correct.
but if they do chat you any kind of questions, you can just let me know. But I am sharing my screen now, so everybody should be able, those that are participating, should be able to see it as well. So what I did is I went through your results, and you had them in 5 different areas. And when we look at these, what we try to look at is the areas where folks are saying that we're either not where we want to be or we're ineffective. So developing or ineffective. Those are the ones that we're looking at. If we're ranking ourselves effective, highly effective, that tends to be an area that we're doing pretty strong in. And unless it's something that you just started seeing growth in and you want to make sure it continues, generally we don't make goals around that. We usually find a goal that a place where we want to see some improvements. The next thing that I'll look at is how many. So you have 5 members on the board. Anytime that there's 3 of something, so if 3 people marked either developing or ineffective, that tells me that the majority of the board doesn't feel like that's an area of strength necessarily. So that would draw my attention to that. So I don't know the last time that you all had the chance to look through the results of this, but what I want to do for those that are following online is I'm just going to go through them quickly, and I'll let you use this one. Just to go through the pages, just to look and see if there's any ahas for you. You get my Cliff Notes version, so you get the ahas written off onto the side. But here are, just to go through these answers to the professionalism standards. So you'll see the question, and then you'll see the responses. 1 response highly effective, 2 responses being effective, 3 being developing, and 1 response being ineffective. So for me, that would be significant. I marked that one because you have 4 people ranking that particular benchmark as developing or ineffective.
Where's 7 come from?
Yeah.
Should be 6. Unless somebody did it twice.
Yeah, generally it's just the
But
5
there was-
board-
it was- but this was from last year,
I mean,
so we should have only had 5.
This is what was sent to me by Mr. Shadler, so.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
So this is the 2020.
Right, and I saw that 7 responses on the top, and that's when I said, wait a minute.
Well, maybe,
and
superintendent?
Yeah, I did.
So that's
The board asked.
Maybe Mr. Chavez?
You did one, and Mr. Angie?
No. Should have been only 6, so I'm not sure. It was the 7th person was.
I am,
Powers of above again.
what I can tell you, let me see, I'll look at this real quick. I'm trying to see if I can see who or when these were, because I know when I do the survey, I can tell when they were taken.
Hmm.
And that's a good reason to. Dance. It's free and. Yeah, I'm not able to tell, and maybe Mr. Shadler can tell it where that 7th one came from. I don't have any background access to the analytics that I'm seeing.
Yeah, and Andrew would be the one that would be able to.
Yeah, so I'm not gonna waste too much time
That's fine.
here
Yeah.
on this.
I just was asking.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. I would ask too, where did that extra person come from? So, I mean,
Analytics.
that, at least it still gives us an idea. I mean, and this is from last year. We have different board members, so this is really just a snapshot at time in that particular thing. So what comes up here may not be what this board feels is still the priority. So that's why what we're gonna do is go through, and it's saying my internet connection is unstable. Is go through and see what it says. And then I'm gonna give you an opportunity to say, you know, let's prioritize that or let's not prioritize that. So again, I'm gonna share my screen so that people that are watching can kind of see the responses. And then give you all like 5 minutes to look over the results. If you have any thoughts or questions, just jot them off to the side in your notepad and we'll go through them. But let me go back to sharing my screen so that these folks are not lost. What I would like you to do as you're looking through all of those is on, I gave you a little pad of sticky notes or just, I think there's also note paper, just on the side somewhere. If there's a question or, if you have your interest piqued by one of the responses, so say you're looking at number 10 and you're like, hey, that's interesting, I want to look into that, or I think that's important for us to question and discuss a little bit more, just go ahead and write the number 10. What we're gonna do is we're going to see how many people really want to zero in on, and then we're gonna start to narrow it down from there. So as you're reading through it, if there's any that catch your eye that concern you or that you'd like to address, just write the number down and we will, in just a couple of minutes, we'll have an opportunity to go through and share those.
I can't scroll, right?
Oh, I
That's the only bad thing about that is can't scroll, so I can. Good one, right?
Whichever one that,
So we get more than one?
you can have more than one, I mean. Probably don't want to mark all 10 out of 10, but yeah, there's a few that, you feel would be important for the board to look at.
Maybe you can take it again. It's very.
Angie, if you, I believe, if you delete that response, you can repopulate the graphs. Whoever created the survey should be able to delete your response, you can like it's a duplicate, and then the graphs will be populated.
Cause this person maybe took it twice.
Yeah, and what, yeah, we believe that it's Mr. Hayes, he was having trouble with
Someone
his. He took it twice, he was having trouble with his, you remember that, he said he didn't think it's.
Didn't think he did it, so he.
So he did it again.
So you could remove his.
I can remove one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, I'm just saying, well, okay.
And you have the time, right, for them?
yeah, and then, because it was not, but we know that Mr. Hayes did. On his iPad, he was having issues.
Mhm.
And
Yeah, and I think we can still move forward. I think we have enough general ideas, and I know people know how they kind of score things, so we can still do that. So what I would like to do now is just kind of go over some of the ones that I saw were in that range that I was talking about with multiple, like 3 or more people seeing it as an area for opportunity. I will say, so you have this in 6 parts, and some parts were doing well in all of them. So some of your areas, for example, standard 6 is about the board advocates for children. That was in the effective, highly effective, only one person marking, developing. So those all, none of those met the threshold of the majority saying that that was something that needed to be addressed. So that is an area of strength for you guys. Also, standard 5, the board ensures accountability. There were a couple areas where 1 or 2 people would say developing, but by and large, none of them had a majority of saying that it was developing. So this, in general, the standards 5 and the benchmarks underneath that are doing relatively well. Then we go to standard 4, which is the board provides support. Again, only 1 out of the 6 of them had a majority saying that that might be something that you would want to do, and that was item 21, where it says the board establishes time to learn together as a board and superintendent team. So you had 3 developing, and then 1 ineffective and 1 not sure. Granted, any one of those could be not accurate, but still enough to have marked that as a potential area for opportunity. Going backwards to item standard 3, which is the board establishes structure. only one of the three showed a majority or three people looking at developing, and that was number 16. The board effectively uses the chain of command and district policies to have internal and external complaints and grievances handled properly. So nothing that said ineffective, but we did have 3 that said that this was an area that was developing. So it is improving, but it is not quite where they would have identified other effective. Looking at standard 2, which is the board sets the direction for the district. There were only 3 questions or 3 benchmarks in this particular standard, and 2 of the 3 were in the developing range. The first one being number 11, the board establishes and regularly reviews the vision and mission for the district. That was marked developing by a majority of people. And question 13, the board uses this mission and vision statement to drive their decision-making process at the board table. That was marked with at least 4 folks saying that that was not an area that was consistently effective. And then that brings us to standard 1, which is where the majority of the 6 out of 10 of the benchmarks were indicated as an area that needed improvement. So number 1 in professional standards is the board adheres to code of conduct and ethics policy. 3 developing and 1 ineffective. Number 3, the board is respectful of the board and staff time. 3 developing and 1 ineffective. Board treats each other respectfully. You had 5 people saying develops and 1 ineffective. Skipping to number 6, board members come to the board meeting prepared. That one was on the lower, not as stark as the other ones, but still up at 3 people in that area. But pretty split though, because you have 4 people saying that it's a consistently good practice. And then number 9 and number 10 in this one, the board follows the policy, no surprises during the board meetings. That had 4 either developing or ineffective. And then lastly, again, it's kind of a mixed bag, but puts interests of students above personal interests. It's split across the board. You got 4 people saying that it's very highly effective, and then a few people that are saying that this is an area that needs improvement. So again, 5 standards. What I would do when I usually do these things is to see if there's a particular standard out of the 5 that seems to be most calling for attention. And for this one, because so many questions and 6 out of 10, I would say probably looking at those standards and the professional standards one might be something that you'd be interested in. And then secondarily, the area of setting the direction for the district. So with that, I want to open it up, and I'm going to set a timer. I'm going to give everybody 2 minutes just for initial thoughts on what they've seen. That's just going to start the conversation. After everyone's had their 2 minutes to share their thoughts, I will be asking you to pick your top 5 questions from the 30 something that are in this survey. And there's no rules on it. If, for example, everybody said they loved item 7, but you still want that to be a focus area, you could pick that one if you want. If you want to only pick the one that had 4 people, that can be your strategy, but I will have no limitations on which numbers you pick as long as you only pick 5 of them. So everyone clear, 2 minutes, general conversation, and then everybody on a sticky will put 5 numbers. And that will give us our kind of kicking off point to see if there's any grouping around areas that people want to focus on. Questions? Okay, so who would like to start? We'll stick with just the board members and the superintendent. And Loris, even though you were not a participant in this, as somebody new, what would be something that would be concerning or something that you would want to make sure that you address? So you can still definitely participate.
Thank you.
Anybody want to be the brave first person?
I think it's a strength that we developed with the communication, but I think that that's something I would like to continue to focus on, because I think you can't communicate enough. And so for me, as the superintendent, just continuing to communicate with each of the board members so that we are cohesive as far as answering questions. And I don't think we're always going to agree on things, and I think that's when as we begin to develop even stronger is that it's okay to disagree, so that we can move forward and have what people believe is important to them for the good of the district. I think that's, again, goes back to the communication piece. So just as a superintendent, I think that that's one thing that I would like to, I think it's a strength, but it's also something I want to make sure we continue is the communication piece. Board superintendent relations, I guess, would be the.
Well, I'm new, you said I was new, but okay, do my input here, okay? One of the things, I mean, this is, all of this is, new to me and everything, but, like professional standards here, like number 3, it says that, the respectful of board and staff time, okay? Does that mean that people talk more than what they're supposed to, or, that we don't get out, that we won't be getting out on time? Is there anything that, that we can do, to make sure that we start and finish at the time that we are allotted? I think that's one of the things that are, that's important, okay? And then they treat with respect that developing, I mean, we're all adults. I don't understand why it wouldn't be that everybody would be respectful. And this is just me on the outside looking in, okay? Again, I've never been to these meetings, but this is kind of like, whoa. Okay, does that mean that we're gonna go at blows like this? Hey,
So you haven't been watching the meetings?
no,
Okay,
that's why.
clean slate.
Clean slate. This is like the first, I don't know where any of your philosophy for anybody, nothing at all, nothing. 0. Okay, it's just, my world was,
And I think that sometimes teachers, they just get
yes.
focused in their classroom.
Focus on my class,
No, I
focus on
just,
my kids.
I started watching meetings and.
Never. I swear, I'm sorry. I've been there for 44 years, never saw one. Okay, I think I went to one board meeting once because I had to go because I was given an award or something. That's about the only time I went, and it was, just really, just for a little bit and then went out, so.
I think there's one person in Kansas that actually watches the board meetings.
Really?
No, just
No,
kidding.
really, I'm sure, but, okay, I mean, and again, it just, it kind of surprises me, okay, where it says that, that maybe we're not respectful with each other. Where it says here that some of us have, voted on there's lack of respect, and that's kind of scary. You know what I'm saying? Just my
You
input.
work with middle school.
Yes, I do. I do with 6th, 7th, and 8th graders. I also work with high school, but, okay, sorry. Mhm.
It was, for some reason, I had it very like Chinese, and it was not what people know that it was time. All right, so let's just go around. We'll go to Susan.
I marked some of these. 1, 2, I only marked 4.
That's fine, just in general, what were your overall thoughts? We'll get to that.
Well, I mean, I remember it well. And when we talked about it, after it came out. It would be different when we do it next. I forget which month that is. I think it's in the winter. But I mean, a lot of the stuff is still gonna be developing.
Okay.
Just is.
We usually do it in January.
Is it January? I know it was winter.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and go to the next person. Or do you want to pass?
I'll pass to Mr. Beach.
Lourdes, I was the same way. I tried to not attend board meetings even when I was a principal in Nogales. So yeah, I hear you.
Yeah.
Cause really, they were somewhat. Especially down there, when I was there, but anyway. Yeah, I mean, I look at this and. I had to refresh this and I wish I would have saved it because I would have liked to. I was at the list and stuff beforehand. That's my fault, or we should have asked for it, because I like to refresh my memory. But I know we did this in July of last year, so it's now what, 14 months? And so a lot of this was probably even previous from those 6 months, a year to a year. But again, nothing to, I remember John giving his opinions on some of these things. And a lot of his were on the developing side. Now, how would that change with the 5 of us? And where would that stand on this if we would have just, and Louis, just, you probably wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah.
Because like I think Susan asked you, but at least the 4 of us, see where we're at in this, because I think a lot of this, we've moved probably in a little more progression into developing effective in some areas, certainly. I think that, obviously we don't always agree on things, and makes sense, because we all have our opinions, and that's what it should be. But it's the opinions of whether or not what makes it good for the board, and I guess that's for the district itself. Again, I have a lot of opinions that may not be concise with even Mr. Verdugo at times, and he and I know that, and we chat about that. It just, again, it's what's the best for the district, and I think sometimes we have egos and it gets a little fractured. And with, I've tried, and I've tried to just take the high road of age old, don't take it personal. And I think maybe this is some of it, maybe some of it was of that, but I think we've done it fairly well, as you can see in the other areas. We've certainly been very good about helping the kids and helping the district itself. So the ego stuff and all that on the professional standard side, maybe that may be different. That's why that's my interpretation of what I'm saying, because it could. And who knows if we got Mr. Hayes and stop.
You're fine.
Lotus's opinion.
No, and I think before I go into your time, I think it is important to remember that this was taken July 2021, which is over a year ago. And that was also a very different time for schools and school boards, coming out of a place that's been very difficult for a lot of folks. So a lot of things can change with time and distance.
Right.
So I want to remember that any survey is generally a snapshot in time. Now, it doesn't mean that it's not valid, that that's not how people were feeling for a good section of the time, but I think it's also why the results of these surveys need to be processed somewhat immediately after conducting them. And why I think it's also important to track them against each year to see if particular areas grow. And again, it's free, so it's not like I'm trying to get money from you. The survey that we have, I think, is really detailed. It digs into some of these questions even more. So like to your point, like what about being respected? It's not me.
Yeah.
And then it can show you like, oh, last year we were in a different space, and like this year we jumped up a bunch, and so that can also provide context. But I appreciate you bringing that up. Because this is a self-reflection, and this is how you feel, and individuals sometimes don't feel like their team's working well, and others feel like it's going just fine. So that's, not uncommon. Let's reach.
Yeah, it's going great. No. I think we have great communication with Mr. Verdugo. That's a positive. In general, we get along great as a board, I'd say. I think as I'm looking through the different areas of improvement, I saw one that said no surprises. And I think we have a lot of educators on this board. And I get phone calls from parents, I get phone calls from the community members, etc. On things what are happening in our schools. And sometimes we might throw it at Dave, and all of a sudden, you're probably thrown off guard, and we hit you blindsided there. But it's a blessing that we are educators and that, and worked in that district. But sometimes I think we take a lot of the stuff, and instead of following the protocol and, hey, you need to see the principal first, then that doesn't get solved. You go to Mr. Verdugo, we sort of override some of that. But that's one that I saw that maybe we need a little bit of improvement as far as mine.
Thank you.
That's all I got.
And I would say that, you know, back to my comment, I don't know if we had time, but that it's gotten better. So I think that that's why I'm talking about the communication with me has gotten better, like that. When there is issues that, you know, they'll bring it to me in the conversation so that knowing that I can either kick it back to the principal or try to give them an answer so that it's not a surprise in a board meeting that comes out like, oh, yeah,
I got you.
yeah, gotcha, mom, because then, and so I share with the board is that, you know, I like to be able to give them an actual answer instead of saying, I think sometimes the community, when I say that I'll have to get back to you, then it makes it look like we're not communicating. And I think that that's where, you know, if I know ahead of time, I can get an answer before the board meeting or, you know, put it on the agenda or something, give them some type of FYI of how we solve those issues.
And establishing communication protocols for what that should look like. What do you do with information that you get from community members? It's a good reminder for folks. I think, again, like you said, with educators, and I wasn't going to say it before, but yeah, they go into fix it mode. It's hard to go from I was an administrator or I was a teacher, I would handle it, to I'm a board member and that's no longer my role to do that. So I think having the established protocols of what is supposed to do, where those things are supposed to go, because now if you start asking questions and investigating or looking into it, any future action you may have to recuse yourself from, and or if action was needed, you may not be able to take it now because of not adhering to people's due process. So it's a totally different ball game to kind of get around. But the communication protocols really kind of put that in place. That's the training I actually did just this morning, and setting up even the elevator speech of what to say when people come to you in a way that is respectful and validating that they have a concern, but still stays within following policy with regards to concerns and complaints. I'm going to give you 2 minutes.
Okay, well, with regard to code of conduct, one, I think that we should follow protocol all the time, because sometimes there've been, when I first got on, the board member could be talking and somebody would just interject and they wouldn't be respecting the fact that the board members still have the floor. So I just thought, you know, I think you should know that really well. That can happen. And so if you have the floor, people should be listening to you. And I'm just, you're new, and I wish somebody had explained these things to me when I first got them.
Give me all of
So,
it, you know.
another thing with regard to this code of ethics, I remember when I first got on the board, we had a 2-hour meeting about what, and we were told what we can't do for 2 hours, and I just sat there for 2 hours quietly listening. In the end, somebody asked me, "You have a question, Mr. Mead?" Yeah, you know, we spent 2 hours talking about what we can't do. I'd like to know what we can do. And certainly there wasn't 2 hours to tell me what I could do. So I didn't like that very much. Being respectful, with regard to board time, there is no set time. And sometimes meetings can go just half hour. You're floored. You're like, wow, great, we only went 36 minutes or something. Yeah, we're out of here. Other times we discuss issues and wow, we can just be there for a long time. And I think we have to have a lot of patience, because sometimes we have to discuss issues and listen to one another, and there's a lot to be said. But on a positive note, I want to say that, because I think that when we look at this thing, we're looking at all the negatives. We tend to focus too much on the negatives, and we didn't look at this. We haven't even discussed anything positive. Just saying, what are all the negatives and what are we going to list there? Well, let's take a positive direction. Like, for instance, 21, time to learn together. Mr. Kramer's really pushed for that. And Mr. Kramer, hats off to you, kudos. You push for time for us to be together and do this, and I think it's great, because I think it develops unity among us and camaraderie that we really need. Another thing, I want to say on the positive note, we supported Mr. McDougall many times, despite the fact that we disagree on things, and we've had some pretty heated discussions. And you know, people have been bitter at the end of meetings at times, but I'll tell you something. This board, one huge positive is that we always, no matter what, we support Mr. McDougall and his vision. Like during COVID, it became a 5-0 vote to do whatever he saw fit to take care of business for our district.
Thank you. And thank you for focusing on the positive. I do, like, I could have spent more time in the beginning. You did have several things in the beginning, and that I had mentioned, which is making sure that students were your primary goal, that you are holding people accountable, that you are, trying to align your mission and, to your decision making. So, I think that that is great. And I also think there's a lot of good points made, because you're reflecting back on a previous time, right? And so you're trying to see where you're at today, which is perfect, because, and which is why I wanted to give us all that time to talk things out a little bit, instead of going straight into giving you your top 5, because I want to focus in, and do a little bit, I'm gonna pull up my PowerPoint now and do a little bit of training about goal setting and where you should be putting your mind and energy before we start digging into what you would like to work on. So let me pull up the slides again. Okay. So today we're going to talk a little bit about, like I had already mentioned this slide, but we're going to talk about your goals and what that process of continuous improvement looks like and how you keep that going after the fact, right? Because a lot of times what will happen is you'll do a survey like this, or we'll do a session like this, we'll come up with these goals, and then, what are we gonna do? Like we said we were gonna do something about that, and then it doesn't happen. So we're going to talk about how to actually make sure that this continues past tonight. So why are we doing it? Why are we setting board goals? First of all, of course, direction. Goals map out where the board wants to go and provides a focus for the organization. So if the board has things that they're working on, in addition to supporting the strategic plan, then there really shouldn't be any of those, what I call squirrels and shiny objects, those distracting things where this is my pet project and I want us to have 4 board meetings about this. Why are we having that meeting? It has nothing to do with our board goals, it has nothing to do with our strategic goals, it has nothing to do with accountability of either of those 2 things, or celebrating students. So why are we having a conversation? Not that, I don't know, looking at a new science curriculum isn't important, but it's not on this year's goals and it's not the priority. So there's no need in us eating up our valuable board time. And that's part of being respectful of time. Are we bringing forth topics that are relevant, that are bringing us forward together? So tonight, when we're talking about board goals, it's a way to focus your all attention, saying, yes, that there's things that I care about personally, but as a board, we're going to come to consensus on a few things that we're going to prioritize. Okay. That hopefully will bring about unity, because if you're all going after the same thing, you can celebrate shared wins, as opposed to whoever is, the squeaky wheel and keeps talking about it at the meeting until they get what they want. They're happy, but everybody else is like, well, we still haven't done anything that I thought we were going to do. And that's when the animosity and the things like that start to happen. So it can really bring unity that this is not a win for Renee or a win for Susan. This is a win for all of us, because we all said that this was something that we wanted to do. And I find that a lot of times boards that start having friction is they don't have a unity, and it's all about who can get their issue or their thing that they're interested in front of and get movement on it. And that's not really the best way to be strategic, right? And then finally, accountability. We as board members are accountable to our community. We assess everybody else. So why not assess ourselves? We give goals to everybody else. So why not give goals to ourselves? It's not very fair for us to say, here's the assessment for a good teacher and a good principal and a good superintendent and good, students that are achieving. But we don't actually want to look at ourselves or make goals for ourselves. We'll just tell you that we're doing okay. Not very fair. So good leaders always know that they need to demonstrate their effectiveness. And we also know that it's continuous improvement, right? We're always looking for growth. So this is our way of doing the things that we've committed to ourselves and to our community to better ourselves, to be better representatives of our community. And so by saying these are our board goals, I've seen people post their board goals on their governing board webpage. The governing board's 22-23 goals are as follows, so that they are telling their community what the things that they're working on. So those are the purpose behind setting goals. When you're creating goals, you really want to make sure that there's an alignment, and if you have there's an alignment. Because what often might happen is things happen in a silo. So I worked for the city. I worked for a city for a while trying to implement SMART goals citywide, from the city manager to down. They were going from a paper process to an electronic database that everybody was supposed to be aligned. Up until that point, departments just created goals, but the city manager was like, we really need to make sure everybody's working towards some specific things. So how do we start to align? Meaning that whatever the department heads' goals are, whoever their managers are, that rolls into their goals, and whoever those managers are supervising, their goals roll up, and so forth. So the first thing that we want to focus on, whether it's strategic plan and district goals or our board goals, is what is the vision for Santa Cruz? What is your vision in terms of your future state? What are we doing this for? That's usually a pie in the sky. Like, we want everyone to be fulfilled academically, etc. The mission is, what are you going to do to make that vision a reality? So the mission is, what are you dedicated to doing? What is your skin in the game, so to speak? And then the goals are the steps that are going to move you towards that. And then actions are all the different tasks and benchmarks that come up to that. Or some people call them objectives. Goals tend to be something that you're going to see. So we're going to talk about what SMART goals are. I know not everybody is a fan of them, but I think that they're really important because they really focus on objectivity, and they really drive people to define what success looks like. What is the metric? What are we going to see? And that should be your goal. Oftentimes we'll hear goals like, we're gonna get better staff survey results. To what end and what area? Like, what does that mean? Like, why? And so that would be more like a step. We're gonna survey and we're gonna try to get this much participation, you know? And so that's kind of the process of aligning your goals. If you are creating a goal that is not in alignment with your vision and mission, then your values, then you've got an issue, right? So this is what I could find. I didn't see anything on your website that specifically says this is our vision, mission, and values. So I kind of had to look around. I found this on the website about that's it about, and it was, I took it from a paragraph, but I saw this as being a vision, which is, our goal is that the Santa Cruz Valley School District is to provide top quality education for every student every day. So, you know, pie in the sky, if we had a magic wand, every kid that came to us would be getting the top quality education every single day. That's your vision. How you're going to get there is, we are going to offer outstanding curriculum taught by highly qualified teachers who empower their students by giving them tools to be successful now and in the future. So that's your mission statement. If I were to pick one out, again, I don't know if that's really your mission statement or not. I'm pulling it out, but I think that one of the things that I would recommend is to make that very explicit on your webpage of what it is that you're about. Now, the place that I did see very explicit things was this above the bar, what your core values are. So those things were really laid out as core values. And when we have core values, what I like to explain that, and I don't know if it's the same understanding that you all have, but it should be your non-negotiables. What that means is that anything that we do will not violate our values. So we're not going to do anything that's going to, let me pull up your values here. Oh, it disconnected me. Hopefully I'm still streaming. You all are seeing me, right?
You're not.
SC 35 went down.
No,
No,
SCB 35 is the host.
which is.
I see, Nikki, right there.
Oh, I got reconnected. It shut down for a second. Okay. I lost my flow. It was in the flow and then I got.
Core values.
So I wanted to bring that up for folks. So
The non-negotiables.
these are your non-negotiables. Thank you. So if you're creating a goal and you find that it's really more of a punitive instead of a positive belief system, positive relationship, you read this policy or you read this practice and you say, wow, that doesn't seem like it's centering growth mindset and teamwork. That really seems like it's centering punishments or, deferring behavior through, other means other than growth mindset, positive communication, teamwork, trustworthiness. So when we say non-negotiables, you should never be doing anything that is out of alignment with that. And you would think it doesn't, but sometimes, again, the squirrels and shiny objects move us in directions that are taking us away from what we've said our primary values are. When things get really tough and people are in your boardrooms and they're complaining about stuff, and it's even if it's a small minority, they can often take most of the oxygen in the room and encourage boards to act a certain way in order to calm things, right? Because we don't want animosity. Most of us don't like conflict. But what that does is it sacrifices some of our values, and it sacrifices what we said we were going to do when things got tough. And it doesn't mean don't be responsive to your community, but it does mean to take a deep look and make sure that when you are getting feedback, positive or negative, how reflective is the feedback? How can you test those personal accounts against any kind of data or benchmarks you have? And if you don't have anything, how can you test that? If somebody's making a statement, how can you test that through a survey or observations or focus group to see if it's reality or not? So going back to our PowerPoint here. Any questions so far? I know we've been talking, I'm gonna give you guys a break here, I promise, in like 5 more minutes. Okay. So when we come back, we're gonna talk a little bit about the focus areas. That's basically, now that we've talked about what is your mission vision, and I reviewed those things with you, and I'll put it back on the screen while we're on our break so that you can think about it again. What do you feel, regardless of what, I mean, you can use the survey results as a guide, but just what do you feel that the board, these 5 individuals should really be working on in the next year in order to shore up your operations, whether that be working on your own interpersonal relationship and building that teamwork, or be it establishing written protocols or anything else. That will take us to our focus area, and then we'll go through the goal setting process. But I don't want to get too far into that until you have, at least in your head, roughly kind of what direction you're going to go, because that's going to make the next part of this exercise a lot more tangible than if we're using hypotheticals. So let me go back to this mission, vision, values. And I'm going to go ahead and say it's 7:10 now. Let's take we might start on a 5-10 minute break. Nobody needs some.
5 minutes.
Let's just do a 5-minute break then, and then if we can get out early, we'll get out early.
Yep.
So 5 minutes, we're gonna come back and we're gonna share our priorities.
All right.
Jerky.
Did you want to move that as while we're on break?
Nice.
It was at 66 grand.
Oh, was it? Okay.
Got it all the way up to 67.
Alex Reimer.
All right, so we got 6 minutes. We got a 6-minute break.
All right.
Okay, so. We have our homework assignments, which is, well, not homework, it's lack of homework. Use your, I provided these handy dandy ASBA little post-its. And one of the best pens in the whole wide world.
Yep.
So you have no excuse not to want to write. And yeah, if you could just give me 5 across the board, they don't have to be from the same standard, they don't have to be, but a total of 5 things, and again, they could be something that was showed up as an opportunity in the survey, or something that you think you've seen some development in that you really want to prioritize continued growth in. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that is not.
Mandatory 5, I got 4.
No, it's max is 5.
Okay.
So,
There you go. Yeah. And I just forgot for.
Yeah, so the numbers are, each question on that thing, it has a number 1, question 1, so 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we just pick up the 5 responses that you want to do.
This is the hotel, this is what they do. Be ready for this, so this is the conference, they keep the rooms full.
Yeah, nice.
I know,
I prefer these.
I like it. This way.
I mean, I like it to be cool, but.
Freeze.
Not
You're ready to go,
you know, I like it to be cool, like.
I mean, you guys announced that, they announced it in the beginning. Bring sweaters, they keep the rooms full.
No,
I'm just gonna take the boardroom and do that.
This one?
Yeah.
okay.
It could be frosty and you're not being happy.
Yeah.
I need 1 more board member and the superintendent.
Oh, you did
Mhm.
everything.
Yes.
First thing I did in the room was bring the temperature. Yeah.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
It's too cold at 74?
You know, I keep my home at 85.
Wow.
I go 74.
Is this yours, Laura? Is
Excuse me?
this for yours?
No,
I shoot for
Yours?
71.
Yeah. Okay, so I don't have one from you then.
for me.
Okay.
I'm just looking at my phone.
Something just popped out.
I stopped the sharing, I'm gonna pull up something, pull up the results again.
Better.
Hot coffee will help you.
Yeah.
Might be up all night.
Yeah.
Okay. So,
Was there any consensus?
yes, so I'm gonna go through them in order. Two people selected question number 1, code of ethics. Two people picked question number 3. Which was respectful of board and staff time. 2 people picked 4, respect each other or treat each other respectfully. Only 1 person picked number 6. And then we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people pick number 9. Which was board follows policy of no private during board meeting. So that was one that had significant consensus around that. 2 people had question number 10, which was puts interest of students in the district above personal interests. And also 2 people picked 11, establishes and regularly reviews the vision mission of the district. And then we don't see anything again until question 15, 1 person. And question 15 was on maintaining and follow policies to promote equitable hiring. 2 people had 16, use the chain of command appropriately. Then there was several other ones, so 18 had 1 person, 22 had 1 person, 21 had 3 people, so let's go see that one. 21 is the board establishes time to learn together, so that seems like one that is starting to work, that maybe people want to continue to make sure we do. Oh gosh, my computer just died. Why is it dying?
My battery running low.
Mine said the same thing.
Is that thing not really working? Everybody's plugged into this. I don't know why it's saying it's dead.
Is there strip on?
Strip is on.
Is it?
But that's-
Yeah.
Strip is different than what's people that are plugged directly into this, which is what I'm saying. Okay.
Plugged into right here.
Yeah.
Mine said mine, that battery was low too.
We haven't ever powered strip.
Well, I'm sure it's fine.
Okay.
Rachel.
I'm offended. This plug might not work because the hotspot that didn't worked right down there, so it could be that plug.
Want to borrow my computer?
Guess maybe connect that to this. Everything else.
Yeah.
It's different. Isn't it?
Yeah. So maybe we'll always
Take one.
take those.
Yeah. There we go. Now we can just plug it in this one.
Where do you want to go all the way over here?
Good.
Oh my God. This is just really awesome.
Murphy's Law.
Right here.
Make some napkins. Yeah.
So.
She's accident. It's here. Oh, there we go. The police acknowledging. I'm turning on. Did I mention that I'm highly adaptable? I am definitely, we go with the flow type of person. My colleague is much more of a plan and organize everything. So we joke that she leads everything together, we make the perfect team.
Fun and organized, but yes, still go with the flow.
Yeah, well, that's why I learned from her some organization techniques,
Right.
she learned from me some improvisation techniques, and away we go.
Yeah.
That's why it's always good to have members of the team. I think that it would be fun as we're pulling this back up. Well, everybody else should still be on, be able to hear all of that commotion. So sorry for those that are watching, for the awkwardness.
Rebecca, Melissa, Stephen.
Get back to the one of the trainings that I think would be really fun for this group and maybe something that we could do in January, if you all want to be back after this performance. Is if you did want to do the evaluation and do a retreat to go over the results. There's also something called team member style, which is a really fun way to see your personality on a team and learn about what your strengths that you bring to the team, but also how your personality traits might come off to other people. So we call them trouble spots, how sometimes that can cause conflict. So understanding each other's preferred method can improve the way that you approach folks, because we tend to approach folks how we would want to be approached as opposed to how they would like to be approached. So that training is really about getting a greater understanding of what other people prefer, so that you can modify to that. So, all right, so we're back up. Let me share we were on the results page.
22 is the last one you said.
Yes. Find one of the results page. Okay. So there was only one person that mentioned 22, only one person that mentioned 18. 21 had 3 people, which was the board established this time together to learn with the superintendent, which is where we ended off, or saying that that was something that was already developing, we've been working on that. And so it seems like people would like to continue to make sure that that is a priority for the board going forward. And then the last one anyone said anything about was number 30. It was just one person. And it's a board serve as positive ambassadors for the district and the community. So at this point, everybody's had their opportunity to pick the numbers that they picked. Do we see any commonalities? So I want to give you a few minutes to digest that. So did everybody hear the numbers and how many people voted for them? Were they able to take note of that? Okay, so I want to give you just a couple minutes to look at that and see if that then, based on what other people had said, if there's some if you had to narrow your top 4 or 5 that you had, could you narrow it down to 2 or 3? And if we did that, is there some of these that could be combined? So for example, there were several people that picked 1, 3, and 4. And I see 1, 3 being respectful of the board's time and board members treat each other respectfully. And here's the code of conduct. I could see that as being improved, just calling a general goal of improved board dynamics or improved board relationships. And that would be kind of a goal, and then you all can identify action steps beneath that. So whether that's do that team member thing, that team member gets to know each other thing, or maybe that's establish some protocol that we all agree that we're gonna, adhere to, or meeting norms. Some people have meeting norms that they decide like this is, we're not gonna talk over each other, we're not gonna have, side conversations, we're gonna, and they'll post those in their boardrooms. So, those are just off the top of my head, but say if you wanted to say, hey, some of these look like they're similar. Let's come up with a goal that kind of can address all of those. We can definitely do that. So just take a look at it. I gave you the numbers and let me know where people are, because I'm going to ask you now for maybe 2 or 3 that you really want to prioritize. And that's based on your values as a board and the fact that you have this current board, not a previous board. So it's kind of like going forward, where do we think we want to go? The only suggestion I really have is to definitely do something with number 9, since the majority of everyone had that listed. And number 9 is a policy of no surprises during the board meetings. That I feel, and actually some of these other ones, because even though there's only a few people about being prepared for the trainings, we have a training called communication protocol that goes over several of those things, which is let's come together and decide what do we mean by prepared, what does that look like, how do things get on the agenda. How do we get questions to the superintendent ahead of time? What kind of information does the board expect to get from the superintendent and how often? So that would be part of the communications protocol training that the board can say as a goal, we want to establish some written protocols around our operations. And I think that would address number 9 and probably a couple of the other ones that were there.
I think we do have board norms that we work really hard to complete, work together. I think it's just reviewing those again and making sure that we truly stick to those board norms.
Right.
I think that we, I would say veered from them, but we do tend to move away sometimes instead of sticking to what we established as our board norms.
And I think it's always good for those documents, because I see, again, a lot of boards will do the work and then they kind of go away. So maybe that is putting, so board policies are created by the board, but the B policies in particular outline your board operations. So B is for board. So that's where you're going to see how your organizational meetings are going to run, how your voting works, how your communication, that even there's a section on board communication with the public. So what I try to tell people is you are responsible for upholding your policies, but the policy manual is thousands of pages long. So what I encourage board members to do is to understand B policy backwards and forwards, because that's really how you're governing yourselves. And you should at the very least know very well what the rules for your own meetings and expectations are for one another. So that would probably be homework to really look at those policies and then ask yourself, are we doing what we say we're doing in policy? And if we're not, we should establish some protocols. So you know how the other policies, there'll be a kind of general policy, and then the administration brings forth a regulation or a process for how they're going to establish that, right? The board says this is what the rule is. The administration says this is how we're going to comply. Generally, we don't write those as board members. We defer to the administration, but we can question if we don't think that it's in the spirit of the way the policy was written, and then we have a dialogue. In the B policies, the board creates their own regulations and protocols because you're dictating your own governance. So it's the one area where you kind of come forth with those types of things. So as you create tools like that, sometimes you may want to add that to your regulation, to that policy, and you do that by just reaching out to ASBA and saying, this is our regulation for this, and we want added to that. If there's a document, I know some board members established a meeting request form. So if you wanted an agenda item, it would say like, there's like questions that you had to fill out. And that was a form that you filled out with part of your request. And that was in a district that they were just having a really hard time with consistency around what report, like a board member would ask something, and depending on what department, they either got like a 2-sentence answer or like 6 pages of answers. So they really kind of come up with a protocol of what they expect in their board reports, and it was a form. And so just departments knew that when they came to the board, they had to answer these questions. And then that gets uploaded to a form, and then that's something that is not just on a shelf that we created one time and emailed out, but is something that people can refer back to. So I say that to say you really have a lot of authority in creating how this works, and it's really up to you to hold yourselves accountable. So if you document them, you upload them, you're more likely to adhere to them. And people can also know how to address you and what the chain of command is and all of that. So anything else that came out of the ones that people highlighted? I noted the protocols, communication. I noted the desire for continued team learning opportunity, because as you can see, this space is a lot easier to have this kind of conversation than in a board meeting, right? It's still considered a meeting because if there's a forum of board members and you're talking about board business, which your development and board business, that's a meeting. What do you call it? Whatever you want to call it. So the only difference is the structure. You know, we don't have to agendize every single thing when we do a study session, just a general topic, which gives you all as board members an opportunity to have that dialogue that you need to progress the district without the restriction of talking about it only in the agenda and without violating open meeting law, because study sessions are public, so you can have that more free-flowing dialogue in the public. So I encourage boards to try to prioritize even quarterly one study session. I know some districts, Upita does study sessions every month. So but they're if you look at that board, they're very much all on the same page. They all know exactly where they're at in their goals. I mean, but it takes a lot of commitment. Not all of us can commit to that much time. So I'm not saying that everybody has to do that. But it definitely shows the more you put in, the more you get out. That's just, you know, the way that it works. So, yeah, so I have down that you have talked about maybe doing some team building, some protocols, and then continue training and development. Is there anything else that kind of lifted out of that? Did anybody put down a number that you feel like I didn't really talk about or address? Okay, you guys are being very easy on me. I'm just gonna accept the goals that I gave you. No, so I'm suggesting, I'm gonna suggest a couple overarching goal areas so that we can move on to the next part of this process, which is to create a SMART goal and then an action plan around that. We may not get through an action plan for every single one of these, but I want to at least get through the creating of the SMART goal and the action plan for at least one, so you can see the process and how that works. And so again, the areas that I have is team building, establishing board protocols, and professional development or team development. So those are the areas that kind of bigger buckets. Whatever we talk about today is not finalized. This is a study session, it's a non-action. So anything that we talk about, what you can expect from me is I will document the notes. I send a summary after every training that we do. That says this is what we talked about. This is some of the consensus items that we had, suggestions, and then what you should do next. And generally that is either maybe a small group is going to flush out the language and bring that to the next board meeting where it can be formally adopted. Because then you have to do as an action, adopt that and move that forward. So I will put in that summary some suggested next steps, and then you all can do with that as you would like.
And I think we did send the previous board goals to you. I think Mr. Sheathers, because I think there, some of the things that you're talking about are very similar to what we had already established in board goals.
Board goals and norms.
Yeah.
Norms, yeah.
Those are the two things that we really focused on, and I think that some of the, I think that the recurring theme, just to kind of summarize, I think is the board relations. I think that's the thing that you know, from the respect standpoint and just really functioning as a board. And I think that, like I said, we've worked hard in a lot of those things, and it still seems to be something that's resonating where people want to address that more.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm just writing your note. I'm just writing.
That's okay, yeah, exactly. I think that as
Well,
part
it
of the
certainly
survey,
isn't like it was the first 8 months when I was there. That was rough. That was really, really rough, to be honest with you. And then after that point, it seemed like we started to develop more mutual respect. I'm just throwing that out there. And it seems to have been really good, and we have developed and grown a lot. A heck of it. Can I say something though, with regard to the vision? I tend to think like when it comes to the vision, that really this comes from the superintendent, and it's our job. And my colleagues have always told me about this, to support the vision of the superintendent. And let me tell you something, this guy right here, very special man. I tell you, not every superintendent has the vision that he has. My hat's off to Ms. Hogan and Mr. Kramer. Mr. Hayes, God bless his soul, for having started all this before I arrived. Because Dave has a heck of a vision. And I came on and I supported it now, and I think all 5 of us have always supported him despite, like I said, disagreements. And wow, you have done magnificent things, Mr. Google. That's off to you. And I think it's because the board had always supported you all along, even before I arrived. They really supported you, and I think you really need that to be able to exercise the things that you see, you know, to carry out your vision. And look at all the building construction and all the great things that we've done. It's just,
So I will let you know that I do work all over the state. I am a board member. I know, you know, what this gig entails and the relationship and all that stuff. And Mr. Verdugo does have a very good reputation. I think in the state, people know, I mean, we've spotlighted the work that you all have done in supporting the growth amongst students that people don't successfully don't get to see the success for. I'm actually working on a site project where I'm specifically not looking at the Latino assessment data and focusing more on asset base of building community connections. Because we see that narrative all the time, but we don't see a counter narrative to that. And when I was looking for Latino successful Latino stories, all I saw over and over and over again were gaps. And except for the articles that we wrote about you all, and I was like, we really need to do a better job of highlighting the successes, because you guys have students that everybody else across the state of, but you're doing something with them that not everybody is doing. So you all should be very proud, because that doesn't happen just with, it does take a superintendent with vision, but it also takes a board that is willing to trust in that person. And in order to do that, he's got to do work to build trust with you. So the fact that you do have trust with him means that he's doing something with that as well.
I commend my colleagues for having hired him too.
Yeah.
That's a great hire.
One of the things that I will push back on a little bit though, is the vision and the mission should be coming from you all as representatives of the community. It doesn't come from the superintendent. The board sets the vision and the direction.
Yeah,
the
he's the
district.
MC though of our district.
He is the MC and hopefully you hire somebody that's in line with the established vision. But it's always important to remember that the reason why we have local control, the reason why you all are elected is so that the community is dictating what the priorities and the vision and mission of the district should be. And so we don't want to lose sight where we just listen to the superintendent and just do whatever they say, because why would we have elected for it?
Well, I could see us coming up with goals for our governing board, but quite honestly, the vision really, I believe, comes from Dave. We support him. And then there's this other thing, I kind of gotten this underlying thing here in this meeting so far. Like I get this feeling like you run into boards that have been much more contentious than us. I mean, yeah, we've had our problems and issues at times, and that seemed high. Like I said, we always support this, but we're not as antagonistic as it seems like we run into other boards.
Well, and what I always do is I want to go to the deeper end, because I don't come in being like, tell me all the dirt, how functional you are not, right? So I come in and just be like, hey, when you don't do these things can get really bad. And when things do get bad, it's better to have established things while things were good to go back to when they do get bad, or if they do get bad, because as I'm hearing, there was a period where things were not all that great. Because that can happen, even with good boards. There was a lot of stuff happening last year, that even with a good board, you saw boards that were never having issues starting to have issues, because that sustained level of intensity and critique and hypercharged kind of area over that amount of time, people start losing it a little bit, right? They stop being as cool. So I mean, that can happen, but I don't want to I never make the assumption that when I come in that the board is broken. I'm never hired because the board is broken. I'm usually hired because there's a need. Somebody wants to either establish something, there's an opportunity where change might be coming, and they want to make sure that their ducks are in the road before that change happens. So I try to be really asset-based in terms of doing this, but I guess I do a little bit of fear that if you don't document and you don't put this stuff out there, it's easy to say kumbaya when we're all together, but if you don't have it on paper, it's something to fall back on. When things get tough, it makes it a lot harder, because then all of a sudden people aren't in the space to compromise or reach a consensus. They're all, you know, on their own spaces. So I do get called in when things are basically really not great. But half the time I get called in before it gets there, and that's the preferred way that I'd like to do it. Because I think, as everybody in this room would tell, it's a lot harder to rebuild trust in a relationship than it is to maintain it from the beginning. So, and that's what I hope that this will do as we focus on these goals and the team building, to get to know each other as individuals. It's a lot easier to disagree with somebody that's just a name and a vote, as opposed to somebody that you have an understanding of where they're coming from, and humanizing them in some kind of a way. Because at the end of the day, you're all here, I assume, not to make children be miserable, right? You didn't sign up like, I want to make children miserable, and I want teachers to hate me. Like, nobody does that, right? We're all here because we want to support teachers. We want our kids to have the best possible. Everybody in this room, I believe that's why they're here. They're not here to undermine the system. We may not agree. I might not like how you want to do that. But at the end of the day, I don't trust that people are here to undermine it. So,
Right, I think that every single person here, despite the differences, I think we all have the kids' best interest in mind.
yeah.
We really do.
And the fact that your goals stay the same tells me that you're working on them, but that you know that that's really where it's at. And it makes sense because you're doing well in the other areas, right? So it makes sense that you're still working on this one, because you're working on the hardest one, which is the relationship part. And so if that continues to be where your board goals happen, that's great. You'll just continue to see growth, and then eventually you'll be able to divert to different things.
Yeah, looking at the ones that you spoke of earlier, number 3 and 4, board is respectful of board and staff time. That was developing. Board members treat each other respectfully. That was also developing. And I think it goes back to our protocols and norms that all of us have different personalities. And I sit on a fire board also, and it's super smooth. I mean, the meetings just run good. Here, it's a little bit more, I'd say, political. There's a lot of angles coming at different issues. And, sometimes when I vote or disagree, people, well, you can't do that because, superintendent already did his research or something. And, it catches me off guard, like, no, I can't disagree, that's my voice and I have integrity and I'm gonna vote the way my, my heart, my mind.
Mhm.
And even though it might have came off aggressive, I still got to go back to the protocol, assume positive intentions,
Mhm.
that it wasn't meant to demean me or anything like that.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of it is we've got to revisit our norms, our protocols, and maybe review them a little more regularly than, once a year or twice a year.
Yeah, and I think you hit on something, that emotional intelligence piece is a give and a take. So part of it is being reflective of how you respond to triggers.
Right.
And catching yourself when you're not being on your A game in terms of how you would like to be perceived by people. And the other part of that is recognizing those good things in other people and being able to balance, okay, talking yourself down. Maybe they didn't mean it like that. Let me try to go back and ask some clarifying questions. But it's emotional intelligence. It's very difficult to stop our brains from just going into that internal narrative, whatever we want to say in our heads. So the way that we start to break that down is by doing some of these team building things where you get opportunities to start to hear from each other's intents and things like that. So we are at 8 o'clock. So I want to make sure that we jump into here, but is there anything else? I'm going to go through, I have the 3 areas: board relations, operations, communication protocols, and opportunities for study sessions or learning sessions.
I think that, and just to follow up to Mr. Beach is talking about, is that I think that again, that the communications and as a superintendent, I would love to have 5-0 votes every time.
Mhm.
I mean, but knowing that it's unrealistic, that because everybody does have their own opinions and their own constituents and things that they represent that are in the best interest of the district. And I will always try to present as much information as possible, but then as Mr. B said, you have to vote with your conscience. I mean, and that's your vote, and my job is to try to present as much information for you as possible. And we still may disagree at the end, which is okay. And I think that's the thing that we have worked through. I think it's been a process. I think, we've had new members, and I think that's been the process of just trying to work through that to make sure that it's not somebody's trying to attack or it's just that this is, what you're supporting, and we agree to disagree at times, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think that piggybacks right into no surprises. Because a lot of times when I do speak to Mr. Verdugo, he'll give me sort of his thought process. And I go into a meeting, okay, sort of looking at the agenda, I think I'm gonna vote this way on this issue. And then Mr. Kramer brings up good points, Mr. Ramirez, and then all of a sudden, it's like, okay, wait a second, let me start questioning myself. And then I switch my vote, I vote the opposite, and he might have thought that, hey, Mr. Beach, just a day ago was sort of, I could see your point of view, Dave, yeah, it looks good. And I switch it and there's the surprise right there.
Mhm.
And I don't know if, those are far and few in between.
Yeah, those surprises are always going to happen because ideally we don't come in with our minds.
Yeah.
Ideally, we have our thoughts on it and then we come ready to hear the rest of the information or other people's perspectives. And so you will get surprises sometimes because people don't know what they don't know, or they didn't consider something that was really important that they missed. It's more of clarification questions or things that you knew ahead of time that you didn't understand on the agenda, or you wanted on the agenda, or you already knew that that was an issue that you had, and you want, that's when you say, and I've had to do it because sometimes I'm the only person on my board, and I'll just tell my superintendent, like, I understand why you're doing this, but I'm still gonna ask it in an open meeting and explain to you why I don't care for that choice, even if I'm the only one. And he said, understood, that's his word, understood.
Yeah.
So he knows that it's coming,
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the things that we've gotten better at is knowing that, I try to provide as much information as possible. And knowing it ahead of time that the board member is going to bring this up and say that we disagree, but at least I know ahead of time and I'm able to present the information or clarifying question information that they have. So it does help us, move forward, even again, if the vote is something different.
Okay, let me go back to this.
Yeah, Mr. Beach.
But I think that's important too, what you guys are saying is that. Here, we're allowing dialogue in the board meeting, be it agree or disagree. And yet it may not be something that doesn't need to be said, but you hit it right there. There are times where you say at your board meetings, you speak up because you say it in the meeting. Even though you probably could have just let it go and it would have passed 4-1, but you're still gonna say what you want to say. Because you're entitled to that opinion, correct? And that's something that I think that Renee was saying in the beginning, that wasn't always transparent. It's something that we're needing to get over the hump of something sometimes, is allowing dialogue to take place, be good or bad.
Right, even if you don't agree with.
Negative or whatever it is.
Because I know that there've been times Mr. Kramer doesn't agree with some of the stuff we want to put on the agenda, nor the superintendent, but we put it on there and it gives everybody a chance to speak, and I think. That's really important, because if you don't hear first, it's wow.
And that is a sign
suffocating.
of respect, even though, there's other ways of signing respect, I will tell you, like, there's board president said, what's gonna say, that's never gonna be on the agenda this month. I don't think that that's a good way to do that. You're not the gatekeeper, you're there to facilitate, right? And if you have a concern as a board president that they're bringing something forward that either isn't in alignment with values or stated goals, I think it's okay to question and say, hey, can you explain to me why this is relevant to X, Y, or Z? Or do you think that that'd be better as a conversation? But if they're adamant that they want their say in public, I mean, the worst that can happen is people say, no, we don't want to do that.
Yeah, I remember COVID was really tough, that subject, and so sometimes it was really weird, because later on, Mr. Verdugo, he had a choice, he could have put it on there or not. And he chose to put it on there and keep it on the agenda. I was like, wow, he was really tough, and I think, I can't speak for you, Mr. Verdugo, but I think even he was a little surprised that, wow, we threw it out there, but it wasn't as bad as I thought. It was good to keep it out there until people spoke their mind, and it just, once that happened, and you started to see, well, hey, these guys support me, and we can talk about tough issues and still just keep it positive, and still, you get still the same support.
So,
The 2 minutes already.
I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna move on to the goal setting piece. I think this was really good conversation. I'm hearing a lot of consensus. I'm not hearing a lot from the ladies over here. But sometimes people are verbal processors, sometimes they're note takers. So I encourage you to continue to take notes, and if something comes to you at the end of the session, if there's anything that you want to share, please feel free to do that. I always try to give people, I'm very much a verbal processor and have no problem jumping into my opinion. My husband's somebody that really has to think on something for a little while and come back with a bullet point of like the points that he wants to make. So I've learned to adapt to different learning styles over my years of training, and I want to be respectful that not everybody feels comfortable jumping in. So I don't know if that's your situation or not, but if
No,
it could just be that you're new.
I'm new, I don't know what to
So
say from the
let's-
past.
So let's go ahead and move forward, because we really are coming up to the end here. We're at 8 o'clock right now, and we have another hour, but I, like you, have a very early morning, so we're gonna see what we can do and still do justice to the training. We're not gonna skimp on you, I promise. So let's just go really quickly through the goal setting process. How many of you are familiar with this? If you've worked for any kind, I know, like, if you've worked for any kind of system or city or things like that. And most of you have been educators, so to a certain extent, campus site plans and things like that kind of follow this, so it shouldn't be completely new to anyone. But very simply, you have a process by which you do some kind of assessment. Based on that assessment, you project what it is that may give you the desired outcome that you want. You implement that, and then relatively quickly, you should reassess. So, for example, you shouldn't implement something for a year-long intervention and wait until month 10 to see if it was working. It's something that you should be checking in on to do assessments throughout that process. Also understanding that most things need time to develop, so not to can it just because it's not doing exactly what you want. But the idea is this process is not linear, it's a circular process where you continue to reevaluate how the implementation is going, make tweaks, see if it's still on track. So where are we now when we're doing an assessment? Where do we want to be? What is the data available to us and how will we know when we're being successful? This is the biggest part of goal setting because it's really helping you to identify what it is that you want to see. So if we were to look at board relations, what is it that we would want to see? What would show us that we are making significant progress on this? Might it be this goal goes to all effective or highly effective? You know, it might be that on the next board self-evaluation, we will score effective or highly effective in this area. Maybe that's something else. Maybe it's something that you don't have already. Maybe you do a interview of some sort. You just have to come up with a metric, but for you all, and the idea of board relations is just take that. Where do you want to be? And how will you know that that's successful? And you can just think about that right now. We're going to come back to it when we start to draft, but right now I just want you to think. When it comes to board relationships, where do you want to be and how would you know you're there? What would you be seeing or experiencing to know that you're there? Those become your goals.
And I stand corrected, we did this in April of 21, so it's been longer.
It's been a long time. Yeah.
And I think we've held off, and we did hold off, because we talked about it, is because we're hoping John is gonna bounce back, because we didn't want to do things over.
Right.
We wanted everybody in person,
Yeah.
like we're doing,
Yeah.
and we just didn't get the chance.
Yeah.
Because we were gonna come back and revisit this in January. But that's when we started, just the four of us, and then plus we're popping in and out with COVID and some of us, whatever. I'm just reliving this because I'm trying to think, now this goes back even further. And that's what I'm saying is, I think that we've heard, because one of our norms was hearing all voices. And I think that we're certainly getting to that. Because we probably weren't at that time, but I think we're certainly getting to that, where you've heard stories from board members of, hey, I said this and I spoke out, and you know, I think that we are getting, at least getting to our norm of the decision making and hearing voices. And
Yeah.
everyone has a right to speak to whatever it is, voting no against it and saying, okay, you know, 4-1, okay, so be it, 3-2.
Yeah, like Brad, we go back a long way. He's a good friend of mine. And it's true, he said, like, you'll sometimes come to a board meeting thinking you're gonna vote one way. And I'll tell you, he and I voted against each other on several issues, and it's just, that's the way it is, you know, but everybody respects each other's vote there, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
Well, I said, no, again, I wasn't trying to say about the voting. I was trying to say the dialogue that was transpiring.
That's a dialogue, right?
Where the dialogue is transpiring, where we've gotten to where from April to where we're at right now, we certainly have dialogue a lot. I'm saying, whatever. And that's and what I'm saying with what Mr. Verdugo said, that he says that he's hearing that too.
So let's go through the SMART goals real quick. So SMART goals are basically, it's an acronym: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time bound. Some people argue about the R or the A, they may use different words or whatever. This is the one that I like. Specific, meaning that there's a clear description of what it is you want to see. So that's why I asked you that question, like, how would you know? What are you looking for? Measurable is a target that indicates success. And it should be something that's measurable. And one of the things I heard when I was working for that city is, well, I don't make widgets. So it's not like you can say, I will increase from 14 widgets to 27 widgets, and there you go, progress. However, you can begin to create metrics around some of the soft skills. So for example, I helped Parks and Rec, like, what is a quality, clean, quality, safe park environment? What does that look like? And they were able to give me 10 things on a checklist that said, like, if it's an ideal shape, these things will be met. Great. Once a month, there's going to be a spot check, and you're going to get at least 10 out of 12 of those are going to be at an 80% or higher. That's your metric. And so we were able to turn something that was considered subjective. The group that was getting evaluated had say into what does a good park look like. And then there was a tool to measure that. And so we turned that into something that's measurable. So it can be done. It takes some skill and practice to kind of turn it around, but it can be done so that everybody knows what they're looking for. And it's not an arbitrary thing like people will just be happier. What do you mean by happier? What does that look like? Achievable means that it is something that is challenging but can be realistic. So for example, if you have a current reading score across your third grade reading average is 60% pass rate, right? Saying that you're going to be at 100% pass rate by next year is probably not very achievable. Saying that you're going to see 10% growth across things, that's a more doable goal. So achievable just means don't set yourself up for failure right off the bat. Relevant, keeping your goal consistent with higher level goals. So that's that misalignment, what that happens that we talked about. Like your goals are here for curriculum is X, Y, and Z. Then why are individual teachers working on this other piece unrelated to that curriculum? So relevant means is the goal, this might be specific, measurable, attainable, time bound, but if it isn't really what's important, why are we working on it? And then of course the time bound is a due, everybody does better with the due date. So it's basically, we're gonna get this done by this date, and this is when we're gonna assess ourselves by. So that's that. I give you a little bit more context here. I'm not gonna go through this. I shared the PowerPoint with you, so you all have copies of that in the folder that I gave you.
Isn't that inherent though, in the fact that we do this yearly? I mean, the setting back over steroids.
The time bound is if you were gonna say that your metric for success is always this board self-evaluation and you're always gonna do it, then yes, the metric would be on question number 10 that asks about, or questions 3 through 7, we want to see 100% in the effective, highly effective. But you have to write that. You have to write it into your goal that that's the metric that you're going to use, and that you're going to conduct that by January such and such. So that would be the time bound, and that's where you would reassess yourself and take that assessment and see, did you grow or did you not?
Right.
So yes and no. You don't simply have, you have to kind of put it into this, but you do have a tool already available if people agree to that as being the indicator or the measure that you could continue to use. And I think that would be a good one to do because you've already used it, you have a benchmark by which to do that against. And because the one that we do is very similar in structure, I don't think it would be too far off if you were to use that one, because they have very similar questions about respect and respecting all members and supporting the superintendent. However, if you really just wanted to just straight do this one for this next one, and do the exact same one, you could also do that. And then work to maybe do a different one the next time around. So
I think that if we've gotten to where we trust each other with dialogue, and we've done this, and I've done this, and I'd rather say I've been in and out of the business since 2021, to where we could do it openly and able to defend why you were putting that answer there. Can you defend why you're given that? I'm just saying, if you have open dialogue, you could defend it without being disrespected. Well, this is anonymous. I mean, we don't ever, and then we kind of talk about it, but I'm just saying is in other places, in schools and whatever, in your administrator meetings, you're allowed to speak up and say, hey, I don't really like this, Mr. I would think. I think your people do that. And you've got to get, you work at it just like that.
well, I would say yes and no, because you also have to remember personality types, and there's just different people that are more comfortable with doing that than others, even when they quote unquote like everybody in the room, they just may not be.
Well, I didn't say like, I just said respect.
Respect. What I would say though is, and I would do and not or. I would still encourage giving people an opportunity to do this on their own, to self-reflect, because the other thing that we can see sometimes is people will change their thinking based on what other people are saying, but this is really supposed to be about their feeling and not being talked out of their feeling, right? So this is their perception, and that's what we're trying to measure. Where the conversation that you're talking about is what we just did. Once we've gotten, there's no need of hashing out question by question why somebody voted or said the way that they said. We would be here all day and everybody's trying to get, it wouldn't be worth the time. But when we get it down to these 5 or 6, or for example, number 6 or number 9, why did you, prioritize that? This is why I think this is a priority, or this is why I don't think that one's a priority, and I think we should go with number 9. That's your opportunity to have that more open dialogue when it's narrowed down instead of just one. every single one.
Yeah.
Yeah, so just so I'm kind of clear, are you talking about moving it from anonymous to that we do the survey just and show which. how
I
we
used to
remember-
have my initials on it, and I still remember that. JK. And how I responded to it.
So I think probably when it went online, it was just, I mean, our names accompanied it.
Yeah, I don't know how it came about to that, but I did,
Yeah.
and I wasn't, again, I'm not trying to go after it, I think it's open to. Hey, how do you, why you see that? Because
Well,
perspectives, and it says we don't get it to the times to get each other's perspectives, because when is other than this study session.
so this is what I'm gonna say.
Because we're not doing it, we're eliminating the parking lot conversation. That was one of our goals, norms too.
Well, one of the things that I'm gonna say is that we're now getting into what tool to use and what methodology to use to do this, and that's not the scope of what we're trying to talk about today. So let's just focus on getting through a SMART goal, and then once we have some of those goals, you are gonna need another conversation first to say, did we like what we came up with in that room at that time, or did Nikki just force us to have these? And then two, do we do it the way we were doing, like, how do we want to do this, right? What's the next step? I think today is just to get you through the idea, and you don't have to keep any of these. Really, what I wanted to do today is to at least get something that you had buy-in in, so that as I walk you through the process of how to set up your SMART goal and your action plan, we're not talking hypotheticals, we're talking about a possible you could leave today with a board. Ideally, that's where I would like to be. So that's why I asked these three things that came up. You know, maybe I need to go around the room and say, are these three priorities that people agree to? Because if that's not, then I misread the room. So is there, with regards to board relations, board operations, communication protocols are documented, and creating more opportunities to discuss things and learn together as a team? Are any of those off the mark? Is there anything that we should add that didn't get onto this list? Okay. Yes. How do you feel about the three?
It was pretty good, I just want to make a comment that I don't think. Just to advise Mr. Kevin, I don't think we should put JK, sign JK, people might think you're not just kidding. You know?
Yeah, that's what.
I'm just kidding.
All right, so just giving me a nod or something, does that seem like those?
I just, the learning together, it's way too broad for me.
Mhm.
It's way too broad for me.
Yeah.
I mean, are we learning what?
And that's where we would have to go in a little bit more with what specifically. When I see learning together, it's a study session that's either about your operations, or it's a study session that's about a hot topic or key priorities, strategic area.
Right.
That maybe people need more information on. So for example, and if there's a particular goal in the strategic plan or a particular goal for the superintendent, rather than just saying this is the goal in a board meeting, setting up a time to really talk about, like, what is this goal about? Show us what you're working on and give us an opportunity to have questions.
But I mean, because as it was said, it is just way too wide open, and it's just conversation for the sake of how do you feel about X.
Yeah, no, learning opportunities to learn together. If you created that, you would have to put specifics around it in your action step.
Yeah.
So Nick, yeah, I was thinking, would it be like a goal, board members treat each other respectfully? And then come up with activities to sort of like different personalities, different compass points, what I call out, North is A-type personality. So we get, because this is basically the only time we get to see each other and actually do things other than an hour or two in the board meeting.
Yeah.
Do activities to help address, board members treat each other with respectability. And then the assessment would be either this document right here, or we come up with an assessment every 2 months to see if we're on track to accomplishing that?
So-
Is that getting too
Si-
specific?
It's similar, no, because what you had said is board members will treat each other respectfully, and I would go back to this. Is that specific? What do you mean by respectfully? And is it measurable? How are you gonna measure that? So I would say that that is not a good SMART goal. But when you start to add definitions to that. So for example, with the board relations, if we were to say. The board will improve its board relations as evidenced by. An increase in effective, highly effective. On the issue, on questions 3 through 5 on the board self-evaluation. That is very specific. It tells you exactly what you're gonna be measuring. It tells you, what tool, what questions on the tool. So it would go a little bit more, because when you use words like respect, that doesn't define it, but the tool that you use. Asks for people to do that. I would say a good follow-up to that, and maybe a possible study learning opportunity. Would be about learning how other people. Identify or consider what is respectful to other people, and what are the norms to demonstrate respect. So that's where you start building those action steps.
Yeah.
Towards that, because it's not only we're gonna do well on this, that's the goal, is to do well on this self-assessment. The action steps are what are we gonna do to
Right.
get that result, which could be training, could be following the norms, could be personality tests, could be all kinds of stuff. All right, so. This just goes through a little bit more on attainable, what do we have the capacity to do, what barriers might we encounter, et cetera. So. I do not have a worksheet for this, but if we, let's just start with board. Board operations and communications. What protocols or communication things I heard about, your norms, and bringing those back in terms of like during the meeting expectations. What other board operations communications did we hear about? We heard about, agenda setting or questions around the agenda.
We have,
Like, we have assuming
Yeah.
positive
So,
intentions.
but with the agenda items, we do have a future topics that they are allowed to submit to me. We keep a list, and we schedule time to put each of the board members' requests on the agenda.
So that's so you have agenda protocols. What about protocols around complaints or concerns that are given to you from the community? If you get an email, call, et cetera, do you have a documented process for what to do with those as board members?
Just in board policy, that we follow as far as making sure that it's directed towards the administrator that can solve that, as well as notifying.
And so is that everybody has agreed that they will have a concern and that's gonna go there, and then they know that you're gonna let them know, and that's documented somewhere,
It's
all in your policy?
on our board policy.
Plus, there's only
Community
revised
relations.
statutes that we have to abide by.
Of our board policy, it's staff community relations.
Yeah, because I know there's a K policy and there's the B policy, but they tend to just be like, follow the chain of command, give it to the superintendent, but for some reason. That doesn't always happen, and so sometimes people need,
So we've had a lot of conversation on that.
okay, so that's what we do move forward with,
Yes,
okay.
yes, understanding that that's, because in the past, that hasn't always happened. It was always, generally, some people would try to solve it themselves or make it an issue versus guiding it towards who it should be addressed to. And I think we've improved that a lot.
And also open communication with Mr. Verdugo, as far as if we don't understand an agenda item. Mr. Verdugo, can you explain? And that goes with the no surprises.
Right.
You know,
Mr. Dual call.
I don't know if that's written or.
Yeah. Yeah, it's, we probably could write that as part of our norms and address that as some of our protocol. I mean, it's a verbal that we've discussed, but adding it in a written protocol, we could probably.
That's something I'd like to tell Ms. Vasquez, because nobody told me that,
What's that?
nobody told me that, you could. I didn't know until way later, somebody finally just verbally told me that we could talk to the superintendent about the agenda and stuff like that.
Oh, yeah,
Before going to the.
yeah. He told me.
Yeah.
Again, I'm new.
Yeah.
I'm, you know.
I'm just saying that to try to be helpful.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate it, thank you.
Yeah, we spent an entire day on board.
Yeah.
But I think that that is good, and I think that if you guys have things that are working for you, it's adding them like we've talked about before. So maybe part of this board operation is that the board will document effective practices for their communication and operations. And you already have the policies for it, so it's just making sure that if there's things that go along with that. And again, it doesn't have to be a formalized adopt protocol, it could just be a communication document that you put together.
Yeah, it could be a regulation.
Yeah, it could be a regulation, or it could just be a board packet of, these are our general agreements and protocols for our operations. So that would be a goal, which would be something tangible. The board will establish written protocols for their operations by, the end of the fiscal year, and that would be a SMART goal, right? Because it'd be measurable. It doesn't tell you how many you have to do. It just tells you that you're going to create protocols. So there may be things in B policy that you don't need to make a protocol for like example, posting the agenda, like you guys have a thing for that. But where you go to your organizational meeting and electing of officers, you may want a more detailed protocol of what that process should look like. Do you do the quick draw, which is the first person to nominate somebody, that person wins because nobody wants to awkwardly vote no? Do
Well,
you,
that's not necessarily true from what I understand by law. That's not there.
I just, that's how some people do it. Some people.
No, but I'm saying that just because somebody's nominated doesn't stop somebody else from being able to nominate somebody.
No, it doesn't. No, it absolutely
Like, you
doesn't.
could have two people.
But what
I
I've
think
seen
a lot of
is
people don't
boards
know that.
not want to make it weird, or new board members not knowing that they can do that. And there not being anything in protocol other than you will elect a lot of officers. So what I've seen districts do every year, it's different depending on how the board president wants to run it that year. Sometimes it's anybody interested, all people that are interested say something and we'll give you the floor for 2 minutes and then we'll start taking in nominations. I've seen other people do what I just said, which is I vote for so, I second, all in favor, and then, it just happens like in 2 seconds. So I just use that as an example of,
Well, but that's this discussion too.
Yeah.
Before we take a vote.
so all I'm saying is,
Yeah.
whatever you're doing, that's awesome, document it so that it's down there, so
Right.
that in the future, when you're not the same board or whoever comes in that might be brand new, they have your expertise of what was working really well, and they at least have a jumping off point. And they have some historical knowledge of how things were done, so that you're leaving not just for yourself, but you have to think about who's coming up, who might be coming in the future.
Yeah.
I agree. I think we've functioned with verbally and without putting things in.
And a lot of good
Actual
boards
writing.
do. A lot of people are like, we don't have any problems. Why do we need to document anything? It's just working, right? It's how we've always done it. But eventually, either something changes, either your board changes because you get different members, a different administrator, different political or whatever climate that causes additional strife. Anything can happen in which those things, people start forgetting bits and pieces of what we all agreed to when things were good.
I think processes are good, certainly, things certainly have changed. To where I can say from 2006, I wouldn't do things what I did then as we're doing now.
Yeah, and that changes too. I've seen people have to change based on the administrator and that personality. Sometimes they needed something different. Written and agreed to,
Right.
so it can change. So long story short, I would like you to kind of consider, I want to try to draft some of these goals. So when we're looking at board relations, we're looking at board operations and communication. I think I kind of already threw out some draft goals. But let's talk a little bit about this, the learning and study sessions. Like, what would you hope to get out of more sessions like this? How would you like to use this time? What would be the most effective use of it? And how often do you think that you need an opportunity like this versus a scheduled meeting?
Fresh perspective, Louis.
I know.
What would you like to know, but what would you like?
Well,
to-
I don't know how it works, that's.
Right, but
I
it's,
don't know the whole logistics about it, you know, I don't know how it runs, I
I'm
don't
not trying
know.
to put you on the hot seat or anything. like
No,
that.
no, and I'm fine, I can take care of myself.
Right.
I don't know if you knew, okay?
I mean, that-
Okay.
That's what I was asking you.
Okay.
But how do you deal with that?
But again, everything is new to me, so right now I'm just kind of like a little sponge, I'm absorbing things, I'm listening, you know, and I really couldn't. You know, pinpoint anything because I don't know how, this is my first session. It's a learning experience right now, it's not, we're learning about each other, you know, you guys are more about yourselves, you know, and I'm just like an innocent bystander, like, okay, you know, talk to me later on and then we'll see, you know, but like right now, I'm just absorbing everything you guys are saying and I'm just kind of, you know.
Yeah.
Just, you know, hanging back and just, you know.
And I would say, so the general study sessions that we have, we usually only have one like this annually. And then we have one based on our data, our integrated action plan, which is essentially our strategic plan for the district, and then also reviewing each school site's data for academic achievement. So that's one of our study sessions. And now we're looking at having one based on discipline. We had semi-study session on that school-wide discipline, because I know it's been an issue nationwide. We've had post-COVID and dealing with that. And then we're also now looking at safety and security as another kind of study session topic. But I think what you're asking more towards is heading towards that first goal of board relations. How does that study session relate, and having more of a study session like this versus those other ones that we already have?
Yeah, so it could, you know, kill two birds with one stone if it was the board will prioritize 2 sessions a year around board development of, you know, and you can leave it vague, which is, you know, you could do 1 session on teamwork or team styles, and you could do 1 session on goal setting and priorities, because that's a thing that should be happening on a regular basis, is bringing back last year's goals. Not just in a meeting where you're getting that report, but then having an opportunity to discuss whether you want to keep those goals, how those goals are going, that kind of stuff. A lot of boards don't do study sessions around that. They just like, the superintendent will come to the board meeting with updated goals, and boards will give some feedback, and then they get finalized. Again, you're supposed to be setting the vision and priorities, so you should be really embedded in developing the goals. Now, not the department objectives, but the big buckets. Yes, you know, and certainly if you have specific goals for the superintendent. So I think a couple tools that could help you there is, one, I will send you this pillars of what the other, what our evaluation does, because in addition, it also does a piece about your knowledge around policy, your knowledge around your protocols for teaching. So it'll ask you as a board member, do you know what your evaluation process is for teachers? Do you know what your facilities protocol is for updating equipment? Do you know? These are things that you should know exist. You don't need to know the details, but you should know that you have a protocol across. As a board, you should know that there's a protocol and process in place that you follow. And a lot of times boards don't know, what do we do for that, right? So the thing I like about it is it also gives the superintendent some homework, because if your board is saying they don't understand something, it lets them know kind of where to target that shared learning, as you were talking about. What should we be focusing on? It looks like a lot of our board members don't understand safety and security for students and staff. What can we do as a study session to increase their knowledge? Or if we do like a superintendent evaluation, I don't know if you were part of the pilot or.
Yeah, well, I was part of the development.
Yes,
Yeah.
so using that tool can also guide the board on what they should be, what his job is, and what you need to know to appropriately evaluate it. Because there's things that he does, and I'm sure you guys don't really realize that that's the responsibility of the superintendent. And so knowing what that evaluation is can help you focus in learning and asking the right questions, and doing a study session specifically around the evaluation tool to make sure that he knows what you all consider success in any given area. And that would be a study session. Because it's one thing to say like, oh, we're gonna have great parent and teacher engagement, and that means different things to all of you. It would be better to have a study session to talk about each of the areas of the evaluation, and of what the board members are looking for, so that he knows, hey, I was doing this, but they don't count that engagement, they wanna see what's over.
I think that question you asked Ms. Vasquez about what we want to get done, I think, to be honest with you, that's even hard for us. That's a very difficult question.
It's pretty invalid, whatever you said, because.
Yeah,
It's tough.
yeah.
But I'll tell you one thing, Mr. Beach made a good point, which is, we don't get to be together here. We don't come together except to discuss the agenda that's put before us, so we don't have a chance to really talk to one another. Again, I think it increases our rapport with each other, and we clear the air about some subjects and stuff like that. And I was thinking about Mr. Kramer said about the structure, giving us the opportunity to discuss things that maybe it would be.
Yeah, and I
Improve upon our
that,
relationships.
you were, I wasn't gonna bring it up. First, just as a teacher, coming in what you heard too, about boards, and you said you heard. I was just trying to get that, but certainly I think it's important to continue the discussion with Mr. Reduval. And having board members, at least on a quarterly basis, taking, or every other month rotating, is going to have lunch and going to have breakfast with him. And getting an idea of what his ideas are going on the direction of the district. Certainly that's where you will get some good insight too.
Absolutely.
And that's important too, and that's part of our, I think one of our goals is getting engaged more with the superintendent. There's not those gotchas or surprises.
So I would like to split you up and to each write your attempt at a SMART goal. Just to go through the practice of it. I would be happy to whip out 3 SMART goals for you right now, but I want you engaged in this process. I don't want you to just say, Nikki gave us these are the goals. So I want you to do some thinking about how would you create a SMART goal. I'm gonna have this side of the room work on creating a SMART goal around board relations and what that would look like. Okay, fine, you can have that one, and you guys can work on study and learning opportunities. Because I know that's something that you're passionate about, so. Or you, what we hearing.
My wife, he asked.
Okay.
That's fine.
Okay. Mr. Ramirez, I was.
Here, I'm gonna put, I'm gonna.
Yeah, I was about, you're part of
Okay.
this.
Yeah, it's a little small right here.
Okay.
Okay, so what would it be doing? the SMART goal on-
Is the specific, and that would be. It's.
Yeah, it has to be a clear description. What are we going to do?
Improving board relation.
Mhm.
What we're doing.
And so the steps would be.
General work.
For us. That's okay. I'm listening to see.
You can do the board operations. Board operation and communication. So.
My goal. Are we going to, yes, yeah, what's our reach point? Are we gonna know? I'm sorry. That's a general goal. So those are.
Mark, got it.
Well, no, this is.
Well, we could tweak this one. Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
Okay, that's.
Sort of either. Word on this.
Copy and paste it. Just copy and paste it. With your mail.
Achievable, you may have to be challenging, but realistic. Achievable.
Sounds Russian.
Not what said is challenging, target, but keep it realistic. That means that you can. Will be able to.
That's measures.
A ver. Yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely covered.
Okay,
Document change.
okay, thank you.
Document protocol.
If we've done improving coordination, measurable is improvement on the annual evaluation to assess the highly effective team building exercise. Team study session.
It's a challenging but realistic.
Yeah, it's attainable. So some of the things that you have in there are actually action steps to help the goal along. So when you're finding specific strategies, you're no longer staying in the goal, so you're talking about it's action steps. So like the personality stuff, like that, those would be like action steps later on.
Oh,
But you're on the right track. Based on that. It's relevant, attainable. Now you see what's coming out, that minute. So give a date like June 30th or by,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
yeah, because we do.
Yeah, right, yeah, we're just adding. The training, quarterly basis, consensus of the board, and more.
The key is the due date.
Yeah.
So by
We had that just.
By January, yes. January, yeah, there you go. I'll do the see, and then you go consistent with. Higher goals.
Yeah.
It's just must, and it's.
What about? That would. I'll order the specific one. Documenting. Well, both the boards don't put in my measures. Important. I don't know about this.
I know.
What about the time restraints? Where you had.
I think it is.
Are you on the on assessment? Very, achieve.
So
Yeah, when we're achieving.
identify.
Yeah, I don't even need that.
That's right.
But yeah, like, I
Oh, I like that.
was right there. There.
Yeah.
Watch building writing or just.
So it's always achievable.
Policy, and then I would.
Yeah.
You could just put the policy or. You could put them. Because there could be a ton of, they all. You may want
That's the whole thing.
to say where. Should we do the ones around organizations and you know, agenda setting.
PD.
But that's all.
That's all kind of the one.
No, when are you gonna have those protocols?
Right.
Right.
Take that off. Because we already.
I know.
That's just.
Oh, no, we have. Right. And you are. That's still okay. And it's challenging, but realistic. Okay, yeah, because that's what she was.
Something like that.
Going to be doing.
References,
Yeah. That's what I did.
Keep it consistent with high.
Like I know some of the protocols.
well,
Well, because the thing is like when you come together, it will be. And
But you-
Misunderstand.
And we used
Is
to,
that.
like for us, Added.
Is it relevant?
So,
It's hard.
Relevant, yes.
That's how we run our. We have our doors.
I'm an innocent. You know, stuff.
All right, do you all have something? True.
Yes.
Yeah. We already got some of them, but
Road trains.
Right.
Right?
You can also make it a little bit more general if you don't want to identify what you're doing. You could say the board is going to commit to at least 2 study sessions. Before, by June 30th. And then you just count whether or not you have the study sessions, and you can later decide what those study sessions are. But your thing is, the board will identify 2 study sessions on a focus area. And complete those by June 30th, and that would be specific, attainable, all that. And then part of your action step would be surveying the board about what they want to topic on, or, you know, those could be the action steps of what to identify what training, conduct the training, get feedback on the training. Those are all action steps.
Say related to board relation or something.
Or board goal, or district priorities, or district priorities, or to increase knowledge.
Relevant trade to which we're able to reevaluate our goals.
That tells you that those 2 study sessions have to be specifically about goals and norms. And I'm just saying that if you wanted to make it a little bit more broad, to say that we will hold 2 study sessions that will progress the board's efforts in supporting the strategic plan, that's a little bit more general. And then you can tell you what those, but it's still specific in that you will do 2 of them, and they will be related to supporting the strategic plan. But it gives you a little bit of flexibility to identify what the topics of those 2 things would be. But if you think that that's the one that you need to.
Because our study sessions also will go to our strategic plan, or what David brought up, or what he brings in of academic side.
Right, so if this is a board specific one, maybe you specifically do want at least 2 that's gonna be on your board norms and.
Right.
And yeah, and that's what I say, that the equipment, if we have those others, and that's. what-
Yeah, because we already, he's already given our approaches of
Yeah.
Yeah.
finance.
Mhm.
We forgot to bring out budget.
Oh, yeah, we also have
Yes.
budget studies.
I didn't, but I just brought it out.
Yeah, so we have,
All right,
we
well,
have a lot of study sessions.
That's
I only drafted one for yours based on what you started, but let me hear what you landed on.
Okay, improving board relations. S. M, improvement on annual board evaluation to effective or highly effective. And the A's are team building exercises, team study sessions, personality testing, establish written protocols. R is smoother meetings, and T is by January 2023.
So that's good because you're doing, again, multiple so there's some pieces that are specific to that, but by doing some of these other things, that's also going to help with that. So I reworded it to say the board will have 100% of participants respond effective or highly effective on questions 1 through 6 of the board self-evaluation by March 2022.
Yeah, usually I have a week to work on SMART goals.
Yes, I know. I just happen to be able to do them really quickly because it's like practicing. But no, I think that you were spot on that part. And I put March 22 because that's when you've done it in the past, that you're kind of in this space now that you could really do it.
Would be 23.
23.
Sorry, 23. So
So we already-
do you,
Back in time.
do you think that you can accomplish some of the action steps by the next time you do it in March? Or do you want to give yourself until June in case you need a little bit more time?
Make that June.
Shoot, okay.
Because that means then everything what we do at the end of the fiscal year, and then you all can pace yourself and identify when things are gonna,
Yeah.
and that's the next step we're not gonna get to today, which is identifying a few objectives under a few action steps. And I'll send you these documents afterwards with the summary, but it'll fill in goal, board relations, and then it'll state the SMART goal, and then it'll list action steps. But next to the action steps, it'll say who's responsible and by what date, so that you know where the progress should be and who's responsible for that. Okay, let's hear board operations and communications. That's you.
Yes, you do want to document to protocols.
Yes.
Board shall put in writing the procedures, and implement policies regarding agenda setting to be specific.
Yes,
Written by the end of the year, December, for the last meeting. It's doable and it's relevant.
but can you read the first part again? Board will document.
Board shall put in writing the procedures to implement policies. Such as regarding agenda setting. That's just one.
Procedures to implement
And superintendent communication,
the.
What's that?
I'm
superintendent and
gonna
board
put B
communication.
policies, because we're talking specifically about the B policies. By, and I'm gonna do the same June because. December is, you've got like 2 months, 2.5 months, and so you'd have to try to get a study session in the next couple months to get that documented and then on agenda and approved, so that's a lot to do by.
Then it was put out later.
Yeah, so I'm gonna make all of them June so that you can.
Yeah.
It might mean that you have a busy schedule in March or whatever, but it doesn't mean that you can't do some of this stuff ahead of time in preparation for that.
Okay.
Okay,
And that's in line with my goals.
and so the only thing I'm changing to yours is the board will put into writing procedures to implement B policies by June 2023. And what I was explaining to Renee is when you do the action steps, one of your action steps might be to identify which of the B policies. I mean, there's 20 something B policies, maybe only 6 of them need protocols to them.
Yeah.
So one of your action steps would be to maybe have a small committee of 2 people decide which ones need to have a draft and to come up with draft language to then present to the board. That'd be one way to do it. You could have a whole study session on it, but sometimes more cooks in the kitchen. It's easier to just assign a couple people to draft those and then bring a starting off point for the rest of the board to say, yes, that's a good one or not.
So, I'm so tired.
I
I
know.
work all day.
I left my house at 6 a.m. to do an 8 a.m. training, so I'm like running on monster energy. We're almost done though. We have 10 minutes. I just want to hear this last one. I think I have enough to write them, and then how we're gonna end this is simply. Get you this information for the action steps, because I think we're leaving here today really with 3 goals. And so you'll get that draft language back so you can formally adopt, and then once you formally adopt, I'll give you those worksheets that will help you identify your action steps. And then once you have those, you'll bring that back to the board for discussion and saying, we all agree, you've got this homework, you've got this homework, so that it doesn't fall on 1 or 2 people alone. All right, so let's hear what you have, and then I think we can wrap up.
The board will, the board will actively engage in professional development activities on a biannual basis by collectively committing to participate in internal training brought forth by the consensus of the board and the superintendent, and individually committing to attend relevant training to which we are able to reevaluate our goals and norms.
Want us to email that to?
I'm gonna make that a lot shorter, that's way too long for it to be a SMART goal, so I'm gonna say the board will engage
Your 2 minutes are up.
in a minimum of 2 team trainings to address norms and goals, you said?
Mhm.
By June.
Yeah.
2022.
Perfect.
That's
Sounds good to me.
Yeah.
got it in like a third.
That's fine.
All right. Just because we want to be able to think that if a community member says, what do you guys' board goals? You want to be able to say it to them, and that seems kind of a mouthful. I think because we're community people, we want to keep it simple, right? We just want to make it in language that people
Well, like,
understand.
yes.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that that was very specific. And I think it's gonna be measurable because you either had a study session or you didn't, right? So
Right.
you'll be able to tell at the end of the year if you said it or not.
Can you just read that for me?
I changed it to the board will engage in a minimum of 2 team learning sessions to discuss board norms and goals by June 2023. She looks like she's not convinced that.
I'm worried about the team learning. Is it the team learning? Or are we attending a session on team learning?
The board will engage.
It's
in-
after 8:30, which is really my bedtime, so you'll have to forgive me.
That's okay. The board will engage in a minimum of 2. You could call them study sessions, you can call them, if that is clear, we'll engage in a minimum of 2, I put team learning sessions. But we can call them board study sessions if that's clear.
Yeah,
Is that what you meant?
Yeah. I just put professional
Okay.
development.
Mhm.
But
There we go. All right, so I will get that back out to you. It's probably not gonna be, usually I try to get it out within the week, but we're all, so it'll come out sometime next week. Thank you for all the work. I know it's a lot. It's a long day. I know it's hard for you,
Afterward.
and I feel you. I have not seen anything besides a seat for the last like 17 minutes. So. I have nothing else. I told you about the action plans, which we're gonna go through, so you can adjourn your meeting, and then I will send you on the follow-up later.
any further discussion on this? Any comments, or questions? No, all right. It's 8:53. This meeting, study session. is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you to those online.